It is 4:30.
Boom. Hello.
All right. Let me turn this up. Can't really hear it.
One, two, three, four. We're ready to roll.
Yes, we are. Time is 4:31.
One, two, three, four. What are you fighting for?
You have a quorum.
Okay, welcome everyone to the special session to hear public comment before closed session. Call the roll, please, Madam Clerk.
Vice Mayor Bates. Absent Councilmember Choi.
Here.
Councilmember Johnson.
Here.
Councilmember Martinez.
Here.
Councilmember Myrick. Absent Council Willis.
Here.
And Mayor Butt.
Here.
This
Where's
evening during-
Bates?
Okay, Vice Mayor Bates is here. He's present. Okay. This evening during closed session, the council will discuss the following items: public employee appointment, title city attorney, conference with labor negotiators. Agency representatives are Jack Hughes, LaShonda White, and Allison Picard. Employee organizations, SEIU Local 1021 full-time unit, SEIU Local 1021 part-time unit, IFPTE Local 21 mid-level management unit, IFPTE Local 21 executive management unit, Richmond Police Officers Association, RPOA, Richmond Police Management Association, RPMA, IAFF Local 188, and Richmond Fire Management Association, RFMA. We received one comment by the 3 p.m. deadline. The next city attorney should have the following qualifications: experience in representing the city in court hearings, and also have a good sense of class and elegance. That's the end of the comments.
Okay, you got any public speakers?
No, we don't. We do not.
Okay, in that case, we are adjourned to closed session.
See you later, alligator.
Can I ask whose phone number is 510-620-6764? Anybody with the phone number 6764?
That's me, Richard.
Is that Chris?
Chris Castachoa.
All right. We're going to join that way. So Chris, you're joining by phone only?
Yes, sir. Well, I have the screen showing the video, but I don't have a camera and computer audio.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right. I'm going to mute you for right now.
Thank you.
Where is everyone? Am I in the right room?
Yes, you're in the right room.
Mayor Butt, you concluded closed session?
I'm sorry, what?
This is Shasta. You concluded closed session?
Yes, we did, yeah.
Okay.
We got
All right.
done, we got done early.
Okay, great.
We're now populating,
Hey, Tom, how are you?
good.
John,
Good. Hi, John.
I can tell you're at one of your rooms at home.
I'm in Hawaii. That's
Yeah,
just,
right. Yeah, right.
it's just a background. Well, I'm actually on the beach.
I'm in my kitchen.
Just to remind everybody, you're on YouTube Live right now. So
That's all right.
if you do not need to, if you do not,
We're just making sure the mayor's in Richmond.
I keep thinking I'm gonna go up to Modoc County where they don't have any coronavirus up there.
They have a case up there now, I think.
Yeah, they have 2 cases now.
Yeah.
Oh,
That
yeah?
is- Our health officer knows. Yes, they have 2 cases.
Well, that's not very many. 2 cases, right?
There's not many people who live in Modoc County.
So Chris, I passed on, as you know, I'm willing to say anything with regard to, I'm here on originally the project room key, but also here to support the Randy, the lease issue.
Great, thanks.
this is Richard from KCRT. If you're not part of the opening part of this meeting, if you can turn off your camera and mute your microphone and come back when it's your item. Thank you.
So I'm waiting for a quorum here. I see 1, 2, I see 3 of us.
We have a quorum at 5:30.
Good work, everyone. So let's get this meeting started. This is a special meeting of the Richmond City Council, and we'll start off with a roll call.
Vice Mayor Bates. Absent. Councilmember Choi. Absent. Councilmember Johnson.
Present.
Councilmember Martinez.
Here.
Councilmember Myrick. Absent. Councilmember Willis.
Here.
And Mayor Butt.
Here. Next item.
Next item on the agenda is statement of conflict of interest. Are there any? Hearing none. Item C is agenda review.
So what I'm proposing to do, we have 2 items that are, Supervisor Joy is here with us tonight to address them along with some other county staff. And based on information he gave us just a little while ago, I don't think either one of them are going to take any time at all to deal with. So I'm proposing to move items G2 and G3 up to right before the consent calendar. I think we can get them out of here and get those folks out of here, and then we can move ahead. So if there's no objection, that's what I'm going to propose to do.
So Mayor, but just for clarification, you want those two items right before we approve the consent calendar?
Yeah, right before consent calendar.
Okay.
Did I see your hand up, Councilor Willis?
I was agreeing with you.
Okay, that's great. That's what we like. Okay, let's move ahead.
Next item, item D, is a report from the city attorney of final decisions made during closed session.
I have nothing to report.
Item E is a report from the city manager.
So, Council, this evening I am pleased to let you know that one of the folks who work with us in the library in Richmond has stepped up to be our interim library director, and her name is Jane Pratt. She's actually worked here for almost 10 years, most recently in the past 2 years as our administrative librarian. She has a master's degree in library and information studies from Berkeley, and has been in the library field for over 30 years. So we're really pleased that she's been able to step up and help us as interim director.
Okay, I think with that, let's go into item G1, G2. Why don't you start with G1, Madam Clerk?
G1 or G2 and 3?
G2.
I'm sorry, G2 and G3.
Okay, so item G2.
Yeah.
Just authorize the city manager to negotiate and execute an agreement and all auxiliary and required documents with Contra Costa County Health Services to enable the COVID-19 testing site at a City of Richmond Civic Center parking lot, currently proposed at 24th and Barrett Avenue.
So instead of starting off with a staff report, I'm going to ask Supervisor Joya to give us an update, and I think we can move ahead.
Thanks, Mayor Butt and council members. And let me just say, we always appreciate the partnership with the city of Richmond on a number of issues, including dealing with this pandemic. And the county has been clearly looking for greater opportunity to increase testing capacity here in West Contra Costa County and in Richmond. And in doing that, our county health staff identified the possibility of having a site at the parking lot near City Hall in the auditorium that would allow the county to really ramp up testing significantly. As you know, there's been a delay in getting test results. Unfortunately, that is a statewide issue. And unfortunately, there's not a lot we can do now about that, but it's been problematic for all of us. However, increasing testing capacity will be very helpful. And I know there's a team of folks on here, and I'll just ask if our health officer, Dr. Farnatano, wants to add anything further with regard to this testing capacity.
I'll just say that we are, working multiple ways to improve our testing capacity, and we're also trying to, focus our testing resources in the communities that are most hardest hit. And as I'm sure you're all well aware, Richmond is one of our hardest hit communities with very high rates of COVID, including 11 residents who have passed away from COVID in the city of Richmond. So it's really a priority for us to make sure we have testing available in Richmond, and with the Kennedy site at some point may need to be available for when school is able to resume in person. We want to really think long term, not only a site that will allow more capacity, but a site will be able to be present for a long time. And so because we know this virus is going to be with us for a while. It's going to be a long time before we have a vaccine. And so this is part of the reason for this proposal.
And Dr. Farnatano, maybe if you can just briefly say how many tests a day and the drive-through, how that will work, the tests per day and the days and the days and hours.
So we are hoping to run it initially Monday through Friday, 8 to 3:30. Eventually, we'd like to also offer weekend testing once we have the staff to be able to do that. We estimate it's going to be about 400 tests a day, and it's going to be both drive up and walk in. So it's going to be, options for whichever way people have transportation. There can be it can handle up to 20 cars waiting at one time. So 400 tests a day, Monday through Friday, and then eventually we could add the weekends.
So, so you're still asking to use the site, right?
Oh,
Yes.
yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Mayor Bud, if you'd like us to, we do have a brief presentation prepared that we did develop in coordination with Contra Costa Health Services staff. If you would like us to go ahead and walk you through the authorization we're requesting, as well as the coordination that's been taking place.
Yeah, okay, all right, why don't you do that, and then we'll have questions.
Okay, so I would like to ask KCRT to go ahead and put up the PowerPoint. So this evening, Mayor Budd and members of the council, Supervisor Joya, Contra Costa Health Services, thank you all for joining us. We really appreciate the ongoing collaborative relationship we have with Contra Costa Health Services. And this evening, we're asking for authorization for the city manager to negotiate and execute an agreement, as well as all ancillary required documents with Contra Costa Health Services to enable us to proceed with COVID testing in the city of Richmond. And the proposed location now is at the Civic Center parking lot on 24th and Barrett. And if we can go ahead and go to the next slide. By way of background, as was mentioned previously, there's been testing taking place at Kennedy High School. The county health staff toured various sites throughout Richmond with our fire chief, Adrian Shepard, and have come to the conclusion that based on the needs of the needs and use and demand, that the Barrett Avenue parking lot here adjacent to Nevin Plaza and here at Civic Center would be the most ideal location. Next slide, please. As was mentioned previously, hours are proposed to start between 8 a.m. and 3:30 p.m. With both drive up and walk-in appointments. We're really excited that the county is aiming to provide 400 tests per day with up to 20 cars waiting at any given time. So we'll be working with our Public Works, Engineering, and Community Services Department, as well as Fire and Police to organize all of this, ensure there's smooth traffic flow. The idea is that testing could commence as early as August 14th. And the concept is that in the agreement, it will outline that the county health department will administer and run the testing sites, and they will provide 24-hour, 7-day-a-week security at the site. In addition, at this juncture, the concept is that the farmers market would not be asked to relocate, which we think is very important because that's a well-run farmers market that provides vital food access to our community. As we go to the next slide, you'll see what we're referring to as Exhibit A, which will be in the agreement between the city and the county that we're asking the city council to authorize this evening. And the yellow is the area that is proposed to be the COVID testing site. We have been working in close collaboration also with our community services staff, and Danae Evans will be working with Sal Vaca, the Director of Community Services, to implement and develop a comprehensive community engagement plan. The transportation department for the city, they're under community services, will be contacting all the stakeholders. We think it's important to note that at this juncture, the parking lot is currently utilized by residents of the Nevin Richmond Housing Authority property. However, we are not required to provide, there's no lease agreement in place with the residents to utilize those parking spaces. And in addition to that, the mortuary utilizes the parking lot. So we do want to have some thoughtful community engagement and also notify the neighborhood councils and so forth. And unfortunately, given the urgency of this matter, that has not occurred yet, but is something that staff plan to do in coordination with the county. For the next slide, I would like to turn it over to Contra Costa Health Services. to elaborate on other potential supplemental services that we've discussed, if they're inclined to do so.
Sure. Yeah, so as we've had with our other models, we plan to reserve a few testing appointments for urgent needs, for example, first responders and other essential workers who might be symptomatic or have an exposure, so that we can make sure we can get them in quickly. We're also, as I mentioned before, we're hoping to expand the testing over the weekend, and then hoping that in collaboration with the city of Richmond, we could actually start adding additional health services to the site. So it could expand beyond simply a COVID testing site and explore some potential other services to provide care or provide access or navigation of healthcare at the site.
Okay, next slide, please. So in terms of next steps, again, we're planning to work collaboratively with Contra Costa Health Services to conduct comprehensive community engagement with stakeholders. Also at this juncture, we are still fine tuning the plan. And so for example, if Contra Costa County health staff need to utilize a bathroom, the appropriate one that has limited access at this juncture would be at 440 Civic Center Plaza. And so we would be making a request for them to provide security at that location. And in conclusion, you'll see here again the recommended action for your consideration this evening on the next slide, where we're again asking you for authority for the city manager to negotiate and execute the agreement and any other required documents that are needed to enable us to commence with COVID-19 testing. We also, I personally want to thank Contra Costa Health Services. We've had a long time partnership with them to work on improving health outcomes in Richmond, and was really personally very excited to see Shannon Beasley now will be helping lead some of the equity work to address the spread of COVID-19 in West County. And so she's had a longstanding working relationship with the city manager's office staff and working on health and all policies in Richmond. And so really want to thank the county for providing that additional resource to our community in this difficult time.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions from council members? Councilor Willis.
Thank you. No, I think this is great. Thanks for being here from Health Services, and John, I am happy to support it. Only thing I just wanted to bring up is there a plan to coordinate with Contra Costa, because in our plaza we do have homeless traffic that comes through there, and I'd want to make sure that we reach out to the unhoused individuals, get them tested, and maybe Cora can evaluate what other services they can fall into to transition them out if possible.
And Lavana Martin, our housing homeless and health director is on for the next item. So maybe Lavana can address that.
I have a question, Tom.
You want, Lavana, did you want just a brief response from our homeless director?
If that's okay and appropriate through the chair.
Go ahead, Lavana.
Happy to jump in really quickly here. Yes, we most certainly can make sure that our core teams are coordinating efforts during that time during the testing, but also as a precursor to testing and just ensuring that those individuals are connected to services, engaged. We have been doing a really good job with our testing branch and testing many of the individuals that we are coming across who are living outside, but also in our hotel rooms for testing as well. We will continue that. So we most certainly will coordinate our efforts and ensure that our core teams are engaging.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Vice Mayor Bates, did you have a question?
I've had the pleasure of being tested a couple of times.
Pleasure.
First, I drove all the way to Concord with an appointment. Then the second time, I tried to get tested at the San Pablo Medical Facility. There was not one person in line for the drive-through. They insisted that because I didn't have an appointment, I couldn't be tested. So I chose to go and park and go inside. where after several questions, they were provided me an opportunity to be tested. My question is this: if you don't have an appointment and you have no lines waiting to be tested, why can't you be tested through the drive-in service?
I'm sure Dr. Farnatano or someone on the team can address that.
Yeah, I know that when the process they follow is they do screen people over the phone, and there's a few key questions they have you answer, which probably when you walked in, they may have addressed, trying to identify, are you a first responder? Are you a close contact? They like to really do all those things kind of ahead of time, so that they're not doing it, when somebody's in line, in the car line. So I think that's part of the reason why they've kind of set it up as an appointment-based system. Also trying to avoid, long lines and long waits for people. Obviously, in that situation, there wasn't a line or anything like that. But I think that's been the kind of process they've set up to try to avoid, people having to long wait for that kind of screening process.
Well, I can understand that. However, the fact is that there was no lines, no automobiles, and as I proceeded to get tested and I came out, there was still no automobiles. I can understand also that those who have appointment get priority. They should be moved ahead and not having to be delayed. But if you got zero automobiles, it only takes a minute or so to get the information that you can get over the telephone. That's totally inefficiency. And you need to do something about it for people who walk in or drive through, to give them the service and have to say, oh, you got to get an appointment. Yet no one is in line. And I guarantee you, when I went there was no one in line for about 20 minutes or more. In fact, I never saw anyone in line, even after I had completed my testing and drove away. You need to look into it.
I'll definitely bring that back to our testing team that's set up those procedures and see if we can make it a little more flexible for walk-ins when there's not a wait, not only walk-ins, but drive-ins when there's not a wait. So good feedback.
Okay, any other questions? I don't see it. Do we have a motion to approve item G2?
Are there any public speakers?
Oh, that's a good question.
There are no
Madam Clerk?
public speakers for this item.
Okay.
Okay, so moved.
We have a motion by Willis and a
Second by Johnson.
second by Johnson. Call the roll, please, Madam Clerk.
Vice Mayor Bates,
Yes.
Councilmember Choi,
Yes.
Councilmember Johnson,
Yes.
Councilmember Martinez,
Yes.
Councilmember Myrick,
Yes.
Councilmember Willis,
Yes.
and Mayor Butt.
Yes.
The vote is unanimous.
Okay, so call the next item.
Item
Mayor Butt,
G3.
Council.
Item G3.
Mr. Mayor, before you proceed to the meeting, I was late arriving. So would you, Madam Clerk, record me as voting no on the consent item? I think it's F2, the salary.
Items.
I can't see you.
We have not voted on the consent calendar yet.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
Item G3 is to receive an update on Contra Costa County's recent actions related to potential purchase of the Hilltop Courtyard by Marriott in Richmond at 3150 Garrity Way to provide supportive housing and support services for persons experiencing homelessness, and direct the city manager to draft a letter to the county administrator requesting the development of a comprehensive community engagement plan for Richmond residents, businesses, and property owners regarding the proposed acquisition.
So Supervisor Joy, can you?
I'll give an update.
Read off on this too, please.
Yeah, and Lavana will add. So as you know, the county using Project Room Key funds from the state has leased a number of hotels countywide for people who are homeless or from shelters, and also a hotel to have individuals who've tested positive be able to self-isolate. The two hotels in Richmond are the Sure Stay on Cutting and Canal, and the Courtyard Marriott. The Courtyard Marriott has actually individuals who formerly lived at the Richmond Rescue Mission. The county is planning to apply for state funds called Project Home Key to look at purchasing a hotel or apartment buildings or other hotels to be able to develop permanent housing for previously homeless individuals. The county, our Board of Supervisors authorized applying for state funding. Our resolution did not cite any specific sites yet in the application. And the one site that we're moving forward with is the Motel 6 in Pittsburgh. The county has done due diligence on sites, other sites, including the Marriott and the Sure Stay. And it really has determined right now that neither of those two sites, due to a number of factors, especially the cost, will allow the county to move forward to apply on those two sites. So it's pretty simple that the Marriott and the Sure Stay are not two hotels that the county will be moving forward with purchasing. However, if you want to help us identify other possible sites, either hotel, motel, or an apartment building, the county's open to that. And Lavana, did you want to add anything? Our Health, Housing, and Homeless Director?
Sure. Thank you very much. And I really appreciate being here this evening, Mayor, but council members. I wish I was actually here to actually ask you and start a community engagement process. But after our real property services has started to do some due diligence, as Supervisor Joya mentioned, it looks like the Courtyard Marriott as well as the Shore Stay are really just out of reach with what the resources that are available at the state level through our Home Key program. And so I most certainly support Supervisor Joya's ask around please partner in the event that there is property that you have perhaps identified. We need more permanent housing. We need about 3,000 more units in this community. And so if there's an opportunity to partner with you to identify a site, I would love to do that. Home Key right now offers us an opportunity to purchase, to get funding for about $100,000 per door. So with that sort of in mind, if there are any properties, please reach out. It most certainly want to make sure that we continue to develop permanent supportive housing in this community.
So what I'm thinking is, I think we've got your message about looking for other alternate sites, and I'm thinking at this point we can just remove this from the agenda because it's no longer.
I want to speak on it. I want to speak on it, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead, but that's my inclination. Is yeah.
Well, you know, when I first heard this, I was highly agitated and disappointed in the fact that the supervisor never once consulted with us. First of all, we all recognize the need for homelessness, but a hotel like the Marriott is one of the most stupidest ideas I ever heard. They have no cooking facility. They don't have, it's just a 1-bedroom. And if you want homeless people to be comfortable, at least show some respect and get them with a living accommodation that provide where they have a refrigerator, they can cook, and so forth. And the other thing is that the most logical thing to do is locate property where you can build to the specification of a decent person living in a comfortable environment. And hotels are not where homeless should be. That's a disintegrating and disrespectful to the people we're trying to serve. And I tell you, Mr. Joya, I was extremely disappointed that you didn't communicate with us. But now that you have indicated that you're looking elsewhere in a different direction, I think the city is more inclined to support you and try to locate a suitable site. So That's
Matt?
my statement.
So look,
And if I can just say
we've
something.
got a lot of critical business tonight.
Yeah, I do want to make just a brief comment, Nat. I appreciate your comment. I just to note, I did reach out and let the city manager and the mayor both know as soon as we were sort of interested in looking at that site. And I did personally call them and let them know that we were going to look into it. We were not making any final decisions.
Yeah.
And if things were worthy of further analysis, that we would work with the city and provide information. So I thought I reached out and at least let the folks know. I did not call every council member, but I called the mayor and the city manager. Second, there are many successful hotels that have been converted with tenant improvements that are done. For example, some of you may know the Hotel Utah on San Pablo Avenue, what used to be the Hotel Idaho, used to be the Idaho Hotel on San Pablo Avenue in El Cerrito. That's a wonderful single room occupancy SRO model where there is like small refrigerators and ability to cook, but also a very limited ability to cook, but a common kitchen area and support. So there are many models around the state. Given the cost to develop housing, if converting a hotel in some cases, and then putting in the proper appliances and other factors, the hotel would have had other improvements done to it. And single room occupancies work well. In fact, as you know, the mayor and I worked on having those little those small modular units as a possibility. We had it on display at City Hall a couple years ago. So I think done right, hotels with the proper tenant improvements can be a good alternative. And there are successful models of those out there for single. And in some cases, as you know, there's a door between the two rooms. So in some cases, that is removed. So you actually can turn two rooms into one living unit. So I think we're all trying to be creative and innovative to get the thousands of people on the street into housing. And when I personally talk to homeless individuals, they tell me, we don't want to move to a shelter, but we will go to housing. So that's what we're working on doing. And
Well, what about the $250,000 tax revenue the city is going to lose? That's no concern of yours.
Hey guys, look, let me suggest, I moved this up on the agenda because I thought it was essentially moot.
Right.
And in terms of those two properties, it's moot. It's not going to happen.
That's correct.
And so why don't we move on and have this discussion about hotels and homelessness and all that? Have that later. This is a special meeting and we've got a big piece of business to deal with tonight. So I'm suggesting that we simply take this off the agenda and move ahead.
Great, thank you. And that was all we had. And so, we'll be back anytime. And I know you've got a long night and you're going to be working with your labor partners on other. And just to say, our friends in Local 21 and SEIU also represent many county employees and as well as Richmond employees. So they're great. They've been on the front lines at the county, and I'm sure they're doing great work with the city.
Okay, so at this point, I'm simply going to remove it from the agenda for any further action. Okay, so that concludes that. Thank you,
Thank you,
Supervisor, and the other county staff.
Good luck tonight.
So let's go back to the consent calendar now, Madam Clerk.
Okay, we need a motion to approve the consent calendar.
I want you to record me voting no on the salary increases.
Okay.
I'll move approval.
Do we have a motion?
Second.
Okay, who is the motion from?
Councilmember Myrick, second by Councilmember Willis.
Okay, all right, let's call a roll, please.
Vice Mayor Bates is voting no. Councilmember Choi,
Yes.
Councilmember Johnson,
Yes.
Councilmember Martinez,
No.
Councilmember Myrick,
Yes.
Councilmember Willis,
Yes.
and Mayor Butt.
Yes.
The motion passes with Vice Mayor Bates and Councilmember Martinez voting no.
Okay, so that brings us to the main event tonight. Item G1. right?
Yes, sir. Item G1 is to review the draft measure for the November 3rd, 2020 ballot, which would amend the city's business tax rate structure to authorize the city to tax businesses based on a range of 0.6% to 5% of gross receipts rather than rates based on the number of employees, and either one, adopt a resolution placing the measure on the November 3rd, 2020 ballot, or two, provide direction to staff on further revisions to the draft measure and continue engagement with the business community with the intent to place the measure on the ballot at a future election. We have several speakers for this item and several comments to read.
So I will begin. My name is LaShonda White, Acting Deputy City Manager for Internal Services. Tonight with us, we have Antonio Benuelos, who's the Revenue or Account Manager. And we have James Atencio, who is a Senior City Attorney. And Belinda Brown, who is the Finance Director, is also on the line to answer questions. So with that, I will go to the next slide. Tonight, what we want to go over is provide all of you with some background in terms of where we have been, the journey, and where we are tonight. We will provide an overview of the current business license tax model, along with what the proposed gross receipts model will look like, and we will really dive into the different rate structure options that we have before you. We have 5 options, and we are recommending one of those options. Do want to state that council has, of course, the ability to accept or reject or suggest something different from what staff is recommending. We will then provide you with input from the business community and talk about the outreach that we've done since the first time we came to you, July 21st, and then we will talk about next steps. Next slide. So a little bit on background. In the 3 staff reports that we provided to the City Council and for public review, we've shared a lot about what brought us to this stage today, but the city has a structurally unbalanced budget. All of you on the phone have been a part of that process. Many have watched that process as the city has developed the fiscal year 2021 budget. We started with almost a $30 million deficit. That definitely prompted or it had us continue to really look at how we could address that deficit, how we could address our structurally unbalanced budget. So we needed to focus both on revenues, increasing our revenue, as well as reducing expenditure. As we have stated previously, a lot of our reductions came from one-time measures. And so we still, as a city, really need to address the structural imbalance. We have brought before City Council a comprehensive matrix that consisted of a variety of different revenue enhancement measures, and ballot measures were one of those options. There was some various research done by various groups on different ballot measures that could be placed on the November 2020 ballot to increase our revenue. And a polling was done by FM3, a polling firm, and it was completed in June of 2020. So soon after the city received feedback or the polling information from FM3, and that was a company hired by Lift Up Richmond, staff began work to draft an ordinance that could be brought before City Council for review and discussion. We did that on July 21st. That was the first time City Council received a draft ordinance. We, at that moment, were looking at the Oakland model, what was being proposed. So the rates were really aggressive. And council told us to go out and do outreach to the business community, which is what we did. And we'll talk about that later. And then there was, we came back on the 28th, and then tonight we're here for a special meeting. Next slide. Just a reminder, I've been sharing this with our business community as we have engaged them, what the actual formal motion was on July 28th from council. It was to bring back the ordinance on a special meeting with a progressive schedule based on the Berkeley model. So that's the majority of the options that we're bringing back before you is based on the Berkeley model, but that the ordinance need to be tailored to the economics of the city of Richmond. So everything isn't exactly the way Berkeley currently has their structure set up. We have listened to the business community, also from other stakeholders and interested parties. And so we have a recommendation for City Council for consideration. And as stated, we also have continued to do outreach to the business community. As stated, we will talk more in depth about that and what we heard. Next slide. And now I'll turn it over to Antonio Benuelos.
Good evening. So I'll go over some of these slides a little bit faster because we've covered this a couple of times at least. Here's an overview of the current business license model. What we have in place right now and had for a couple of decades at least is a tax based on number of employees goes up the more employees you have. We do have some gross receipts on a couple of different revenue businesses in Richmond, including the cannabis businesses and the movie theaters. Also, the current license is based on an expiration date starting with the date you take it out, so anniversary date. If you get a license right now, it expires a year from now. We would have to transition to something that expires on December 31st with the gross receipts model. Again, the gross receipts model is a progressive tax. At least what we're proposing is based on the size of business and the business category. So different types of businesses have different types of rates. In the current proposal, most businesses under 250,000, excluding rental properties, would only pay the base rate of $200 per year. Exemptions are currently included in the ordinance, but council has flexibility to decrease rates, change the start date, and add more exemptions in the future. One of the questions I've had a lot is how you calculate the actual tax. I'm using this as an example. A retail store has 2.75 million in gross receipts. We add what's called the tier base of $3,600. Then we calculate anything above the threshold of 2.5. In this case, 250,000 would multiply by 0.135%. The tier base is supposed to capture the rates from the other tiers. So if we go to the bottom of the page, the first tier under 1 million is charged at 0.12. The second tier, which is from 1 million to 2.5, is charged at 0.16. And the last tier in this example, tier 3, only 250,000, whatever was above the 250,000 charged at the higher rate of 0.2%. Sort of like your federal taxes, the lower brackets get charged at the lower rate. Okay, so this would be lower than if you calculated the 2.75 by the 0.2%. Okay, in the ordinance, we currently have exemptions for nonprofit education institutions, religious institutions, new affordable housing, childcare, and City Council may add additional exemptions going forward when the situation might arise. Here's the current Berkeley model. City of Berkeley currently does not have tiers. All the businesses that are over a certain threshold get charged the same rate. So all stores get charged 0.12%. Doesn't matter if it's a small store or a big store. As long as it's over a certain threshold, it gets charged the same rate. And this is what we try to base our model on. So for example, grocers is even lower at 0.06. That's usually the lowest tier for most cities that have grocery receipts, or the category with the lowest rate. And here is what we're proposing. So we're using the Berkeley rates as the bottom. So businesses under 1 million would have the Berkeley tiers that we copied. I'm sorry, would have the Berkeley rates for each of the different industry classes, and it goes up from there. So for retail sales, it's 0.12%, goes up 0.4. Pretty much for the rest of the ones, it goes a little bit higher for the top tier, over 50 million. We try to keep a steady growth for the other categories as well. So no real significant jumps from tier to tier, just modest growth. So using that example, the proposed rate, if there's a restaurant with 15 employees, grocery receipts about 2.3 million. Currently, they're paying $936 per year. With this new proposed grocery receipts, they would pay $3,280. Okay, that's based on the combination of the class they're in and the tier they fall under. This case would be the second tier, and it would be Class A retail. A beauty salon with one employee currently pays, engrossing around $235,000 per year as an example, currently pays $288 per year. But because they're under 250,000, they would fall under the small business definition, and they would have to pay only $200 per year. So they would see a little bit of a drop. And the majority of the Richmonds in business are small businesses, and most would see a a reduction in the amount that they pay. For residential properties, the current model in Richmond, all properties are charged $234 per location. It doesn't matter if it's a single family dwelling, an in-law unit, 10-unit apartment complex, 1,000 units, what have you, it all gets charged $234. It only goes up if there's a dedicated employees working at the property. The proposed model that we're showing you would charge all rental properties at 1% of gross receipts. We're proposing that they would get a 50% discount if they're also subject to rent control. Currently, about 40% of the properties in Richmond are subject to rent control. A couple of examples using this model that we're proposing. Right now, assuming there's a single family dwelling, it gets the rent is $1,500 per month. Right now they're paying the $234.10. That's standard for any location. Under the new proposed tax model, they will go down for them to $180. For a 10-unit apartment complex using the same rate per month, again, it's still $234.10 under the current model. With a proposed model, if they're under rent control, it would go up to $900 per year. If they don't have rent control, it would be $1,800 per year. Okay, so that was the first model. The second model is the Berkeley rate as the floor, but the rental rate being higher at 1.5% rather than 1%. So the only thing that's changing is the rental property in this example. So here, these two business examples stays the same, no change. What's changing is the rental property revenue. Again, for a single family dwelling, which can't be under rent control, that would mean the tax goes up to $270 per year. So they would see an increase for a single family dwelling. A 10-unit apartment complex, it would go up to $2,700 per year. And if they're under rent control, then half of that's at $1,350. Okay, so we're looking at the third option with Berkeley as the midpoint, and again using the rental properties at 1% with a 50% discount if they fall under rent control. Again, this is leaving it as here. The rates, let me go back up a little bit. Here with Berkeley as the midpoint, the Berkeley rates fall in the middle tier. So they're under the 2.5 to 25 million. And if we go to the right to the higher tiers, it goes up slightly. If we go to the left to the lower tiers, the rates go down slightly. So we use Berkeley as the midpoint here for the tier location of the rates. In this example, the gross receipts tax for that business was 2.3 million in gross receipts will go to $2,000. So that's a little bit less than the previous example. Of course, the beauty salon would stay the same. And here for rental properties, it's also staying the same because we're still at 1%. In this fourth example, where we use Berkeley's rates as a ceiling, Berkeley's rates are in the fifth column under 50 million. So only businesses that make over $50 million per year would charge the Berkeley rates. Everybody else would be a lower rate. So for retail sales, when we in the original proposal, it was at 0.12%. Here for retail sales for the first tier under 1 million, 0.05%. So a significant decrease. For the couple of examples that we have here, a restaurant would only pay 1,280 in this example. Beauty salon still the same. And the rates change a little bit. For the rental property, let me go up. Where for this option, this scenario, we're changing the residential rates from instead of 1% or 1.5%, 0.75. So this is a lower tier on the rental properties. So for a 10-unit apartment complex, that would mean $1,350 per year. And if they're under rent control, $675. The fifth option is looking at the proposed Oakland rates with the residential rates mimicking what's currently in Berkeley. So they would range from 1.081% to 2.88%. So any property owner that has 5 or more properties would pay the higher rate of 2.88. Using Oakland's tiers, using Oakland's classification for the ones they've proposed, not what they have in place, what they've proposed and tabled for a couple of years. That would mean this business with 2.3 million in gross receipts would pay about $2,000 per year. And in this case, the single family dwelling would go up to, would be 195 but the real increase would be in the 10-unit apartment complex. The same rate, same rent, but the actual rate goes up to 2.8, and the tax per year would be $5,184 for this 10-unit apartment complex, higher than all the other ones, of course. And with this, I give it back to LaShonda.
Sorry about that. Thank you so much, Antonio. And a little later on, we have a really good summary slide that I think will be beneficial. But want to take some time to share with the council and the community what outreach we did. And so after we brought the initial ordinance to City Council on July 21st, we were directed to go do outreach. So we did that starting July 22nd. We started to try and engage and connect with our initial thought was to connect with representatives from the different business associations, some of which are listed here. And we had meetings with each of these different, or some were together, some were separate, where we were able to meet with them and some of their members and hear their concerns, answer questions, receive feedback. We definitely tried to steer a lot of the conversation to wanting to make sure we got feedback so we could share it with City Council, but also to see if they had recommendations for how we could improve the proposed ordinance. We also had 2 virtual community meetings. One was Tuesday, July 28th, and that should say 10 a.m. Nobody was talking to us at 10 p.m. And then Monday, August 3rd at 5:30 p.m. We really did outreach via a variety of different methods. As stated, we reached out to the business communities who have connections with businesses. We also, we posted things on our city's webpage. We posted things to Facebook and Instagram to try and spread the word about the fact that this was even being discussed. We made sure we posted in a timely manner all of the information that was being presented at the meetings, as well as to City Council onto the city's website. After every meeting that we had, we actually taped them, recorded them. We sent recordings out to those who joined us so that they could share and hear with the question and answer, what that whole session looked like and what we were able to share and what information was being provided. We always provided information, our PowerPoints. So anything that we could provide out to the business community and those interested, we made sure we did that. But we also engaged in numerous exchanges with a variety of stakeholders, some that are mentioned here, some that are not, via email and phone. So while we had some more structured meetings, we also, each of us had exchanges one-on-one with different individuals. Here's some feedback and try to capture, this is some of the things that members of the business community shared with us, whether that was one-on-one, via email, in sessions and in meetings. One thing is that the language in the ordinance felt too complicated and additional clarification was needed. I know, and we acknowledge that some of that came up because we brought forth, as we learned, we changed and shifted and the ordinance language evolved. So people felt like it was too complicated. People also felt like the process was rushed, considering the fact that we came the first time with this model to City Council on July 21st. A lot was discussed about the timing of this proposal and that there's a lot happening right now in the world with regards to COVID-19 and the impacts that that has on the business community. And many people shared that they don't mind paying their fair share, and we acknowledge that that is different for different businesses. But that they really encourage the city to take into consideration not only the fees that they're already paying to the city to even operate a business in the city, but also the state of the economy, which includes the impacts of COVID-19. They felt like there was a lack of authentic community engagement and input, partially due to the fact that the process felt rushed. Next slide. While we reminded the individuals who participated in our meetings or that we communicated with, that the council, via how we wrote the ordinance, that there's flexibility written in to allow the council to reduce the rates, to add exemptions, or to extend the implementation date. We did hear that members felt like the council was not going to do that, that whatever was decided on You know, tonight, for example, would be what was going to be final. There was not trust that the council would actually continue to engage with the business community to find rates that maybe were more palatable. And so they felt like it was just going to be a done deal. Some of the recommendations included establishing a committee, like a blue ribbon committee, similar to what Oakland is doing, and to consider a special election, whether that be in March of 2021 or June, or to just push it off until November 2022. If we had to go with something, we've had people suggest the Berkeley model as a ceiling, which I believe is model number 4, option 4 that we presented. There was a recommendation of a phased in implementation so that businesses wouldn't see a jump from, you know, what they're currently paying to what the new rates were within a year, but that we could phase them in a specific way. And then they also wanted us to consider that what constitutes a small business, especially for the residential rental properties, should be 10 units or less. Next slide. So we stated we would call this out because we had meetings with residential property owners. We also had a commercial property owner on there. And they really wanted to make sure we shared with the council, and we thought it was important that they felt like they are already paying a lot of fees to the city to have residential property here. And they felt like any additional fees would jeopardize their ability to provide rental housing in Richmond. And we mainly talked to a group called the Association of United Richmond Housing Providers. So they're smaller housing providers in Richmond. And they wanted us to remind the council that they pay a current business license, rent control fees, which have increased. They have a rental inspection fee. They talked about the impact of the rent moratorium and that some of them have not received rent and don't believe that they will receive rent. They pay a fire inspection fee, property taxes, and they talked about what the possible impact to them could be if the ballot measure for the Schools and Community First measure is adopted or approved. And they talked about the sewer fee increases. We heard the same thing from some of the businesses, the non-residential businesses, in terms of the things that they really want council to consider in terms of what they're paying. And this is just a list. They have a variety of fees, which include property taxes and utility user taxes, but they also have the 1% for public art if it's a private project, various fees from planning and building and other departments. And then they also have to adhere to various ordinances that we have in the city. And what we what we told them, because you asked us to do the engagement, is that we really wanted to be as transparent as possible. We wanted to hear and receive their input. And we told them we would share it, a summary, but we would share it with the city council. And we also made sure we provided all of them after every single meeting, the directions to be able to provide input to you directly via the city council meetings. Next slide. Now we'll turn it over to James Atencio, one of our senior city attorneys.
Good evening. So what we have here is the ballot question. First, we're under the current heading. This is the ballot language that appears in the resolution that's in front of you tonight. We've gone to still tweaking it in the past 24 hours or so. So the bottom is the actual ballot measure language that we're proposing. It just contains some minor tweaks, mainly that were done to reduce the word count, and also to ensure compliance with the legal requirements with respect to ballot language. Oh. If we can go to the next slide there. Also, in addition to the ordinance, the draft ordinance that's in front of you tonight, again, in the past 24 hours, there are some specific additions that staff is requesting be made if the council chooses to adopt the resolution tonight and the proposed ordinance. One is with respect to franchisees and the current exemption that they currently have under Richmond's business license statutory scheme. Basically, we want to ensure that that exemption is also reflected in this proposed ordinance. Additionally, we didn't have a definition for employee in the draft ordinance that's in front of you, so we wanted to add that in. And also I wanted to add in additional language that would allow the council to add exemptions, which we've talked about, but we want to specifically reflect that, and also ensure that, or add language basically that would allow the council to remove any exemptions that it adds in after the initiative is adopted. And if the council chooses to add or remove exemptions, again, that has to be done consistent with the requirement that the taxes aren't raised after what's approved. Next slide, please. So tonight, again, the action that's recommended action that's in front of you tonight is to review the draft measure and either adopt the resolution with the additions and with the additions that I just discussed, and any other additions or modifications that the council wishes to make, or provide direction to staff on any further revisions to the measure, and to continue engagement with the business community with the intent basically to place the measure on the ballot at a future election and not on the November 2020 ballot. Next slide. Yeah.
Great, thank you, James. So this is the comparison slide I was referring to, which tries to capture a lot of the information from the 5 different options. So currently, we collect almost a little bit around $3 million annually with our current business license structure based on employees. The rental component is 1.6 million, non-rental 1.4. And what we have here in this comparison chart gives you each of the different options, and then it gives you the estimated revenue from the proposed ballot measures. So for each one, you can see how much we estimate, once again, these are estimates, how much we believe we would collect from a non-residential, non-rental property business, and then how much we believe we would collect from the rental property. So it gives you the total revenue, and then what the delta is between that 3 million that we are currently receiving and the total new revenue. And then you can see also the proposed rate ranges for non-rental and versus rental. And as stated, council has the ability, staff did recommend one of the 5, which is option number 1, but council does have the ability to mix and match and change things, and they can add exemptions or do whatever it is that you feel necessary to do, and that can be voiced into the record during the motions. Last slide. So in terms of next steps, Mr. Atencio shared this, but if placed on the November 2020 ballot and approved, the tax measure or the taxes and new tax rates would take effect July 1st, 2021. We would have to, as staff, really figure out implementation of what that looks like. And this is just a few things that we would have to do. We would continue to do outreach and education to the business community. We need to find a software that would allow us to collect the information. We might need additional staffing so that we could do enforcement and other things. We need to audit. All of these things cost. And so we would have to figure out what those costs are. And that would be a cost that would reduce the revenue that we believe to generate. If it was postponed, we would take council direction, and we would continue to do outreach and have discussions to bring something back before city council for placement on a future ballot. Some of the important dates to take into consideration or keep in mind. Tonight, August 5th, we're hoping to get some direction from city council in terms of what we should do moving forward. If council does place this on the ballot and has any changes and recommended changes that we need to incorporate, our city attorney will take tomorrow, Thursday, August 6th, to incorporate any changes, clean up the ordinance and the resolution so that we can turn that over to the city clerk so that she can provide that information to the county on Friday, August 7th. The last day to amend or withdraw a measure is August 12th. The impartial analyses are due August 14th. The last day to file primary arguments is August 19th, and then election day is November 3rd. So with that, we thank you so much for your time and for listening to our presentation, and we are available to answer any questions.
Okay, I'm sure we have lots of questions. Can you put the whole gallery back up, please? So we'll be taking questions from council members. Who's first?
Don't we have speakers?
Councilmember Choi.
Yeah, well, thank you for the presentation, LaShonda. One thing that kind of stuck out at me is I thought that we had said that that we wanted to see a more progressive tiering on the rental side, and it looks like it's basically a flat rate with a 50% discount for the 40% that have that are under rent control. So, any explanation of that change?
A couple of different issues. First of all, it's really difficult to try to figure out the different property under one person can have several different properties under different names. So it was hard to manipulate the data that way. And that was one of the reasons. Additionally, somebody could have one unit or one property, one single family dwelling and get a lot more gross receipt than somebody has a triplex or a fourplex, depending on the property. So a couple of the different reasons we thought it would be better do it this way, but
I mean, there's no progressiveness actually. I mean, it's basically a flat rate with a 50% discount for rent control. I understand it's easier to track rent control,
right?
But it runs exactly counter to our direction. So I'm a little curious about what I mean, I understand that it's hard, but I feel like the time was maybe last week.
And we understand, and we are definitely open to any direction, and it can be written into or spoken into the motion. We do have one of the options, which does have the Berkeley progressive model in it, which is the 1.08 for a certain number of units, and then it increases to 2.8. So if that is a model that is desired, we could do that. You know, there's a San Francisco model. We've looked at a bunch of different models in terms of if it's by unit in terms of being progressive, or if it's progressive based on the revenue collected. So we understand, and in the time frame, we presented something that not only did we believe, I mean, the bottom rate, that flat rate, that 1% is the bottom of the Berkeley model, and we did propose something that we thought also met the request of the city council to tailor it to the economics of Richmond. And we heard that the rate, that large rate model, or the scale between 1 and 2.88 was very high and aggressive for our residential community. And so we're trying to balance a number of things. We'll take the direction of the council to do whatever it is you ask us to do.
Well, also was the 50% discount for rent control, what amount of consideration went into that? That seems a little, you know, that's a pretty big coupon. What's the rationale behind that? It strikes me as just kind of a round number. So maybe you can discuss what went into the thinking on that one.
Antonio, do you want to talk about that? I believe that was based on a part of a San Francisco model that we thought was
based on a San Francisco model that seemed to work. Obviously, San Francisco is different from the city of Richmond. But that seemed like a certain approach. I mean, every approach is going to be a little bit different.
And okay. We are happy if we get a range. If you like the 1% as a high range, if you like the Berkeley model at the 2.8, we can build in more of a tiered structure. If you would just like it, we can do that.
Okay, but Antonio, you're really literally saying because guys sometimes go by Mike and sometimes go by Michael, we're not going to be able to follow the number of units that someone has?
No, it's not necessarily the number of units. It's the gross receipt per unit that's really hard to estimate to to see if number of units isn't necessarily with the gross receipts.
Hmm.
Doesn't necessarily tie, but looked at a different way.
It's hard to do the estimate at this time. Sorry, Belinda Brown. It would be hard to do an estimate. However, we would capture that with the review of their tax returns to validate what properties that they.
I mean, I guess so Belinda, what I'm hearing is that it is feasible to do as a tax, but to project it right now for the purposes of predicting, it would be difficult.
That is correct. But like we also said, we will need additional staff to do that because it's going to be a lot more time intensive to do those reviews. But yes, yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm just covering the mathematical logic of this. A 1% flat tax still needs a number to multiply by 0.001, right? Or correct?
Right, we made really
I believe
generic
when Antonio
assumptions.
used the flat rate of 1,500, is that correct for the projection, Antonio?
Yes.
Oh, so literally it's a tax on just an average unit.
Right.
Wow. Okay. So, so rather than a gross receipts tax, it's a theoretical per unit cost tax is what I mean, are you talking about the projection or how it's going to actually work?
I'm sorry,
in
the
real life?
projection.
Projection.
The projection.
Yes.
For the projection.
Okay.
Yes.
And we
Okay.
and we do understand, and I just want I definitely
So
acknowledge.
where does the extra staff come from? For what Belinda, what extra staff? We're going to have to eventually get gross receipts numbers.
So in order to do that, the way we do it now with the flat dollar amount, there's nothing that we really have to review as far as their taxes. But if you really want to capture what their true gross receipts is, we would have to see their tax returns, what they filed and claimed.
Well, I know, but that's going to happen no matter what. I mean, aside from the projections and the actual pursuit of a gross receipts tax, that's going to have to happen, right?
Yes, that is correct. That's correct.
Okay, so it's the same either way, whether it's a flat tax, a graduated tax, any of this type of stuff.
Yes, we still would have to review their, yes.
Okay,
Their
thank
tax
you.
information.
Councilor Willis.
Thank you. No, actually, and I called staff earlier about this. I share Councilmember Choi's concerns about the rental market fee structure, but other than that, no, I really like the presentation. Great job on getting the options out. I am leaning more onto the option one, but I would like to modify the rental fee structure because it does make it seem more of a flat rate, which doesn't really make sense to me because even when we hear from the rental community, it's not all landlords or rentals are treated equally. So I'd like a tax structure similar to what Berkeley has to represent that. And I am actually interested in exploring some exemption credits for units for property owners that do have units of less than, 4 properties or less and who are already paying fees to the rent program. I'd like to figure out like how we get that credited to them if you're already paying a fee to the rent program, then treating that as a credit so we're not adding an extra burden because of the unpredictability of COVID-19 and because of, we don't know how long we're going to be in the shelter in place structure and what it's going to look like moving forward. So I actually think this is a fair approach based on people's gross receipts. I've had a problem with the current structure that we've had for the longest time because of the, I never liked seeing that small businesses were paying more for employee than larger businesses that were able to actually afford it. That never really made sense to me. So I'm liking this shift and, I'm ready to hear from public comment, but I do want to make those modifications on a rental market piece because that gave me pause too. But everything else, thank you for taking my call and thank you for the presentation as well. This is great.
Thank you. Mayor Butt, you are muted.
Thank you. So there are two parts to this, and the part we have to do tonight, if we're going to move ahead, is the is to put the language of the ballot measure, adopt that, right?
James?
Correct. Well, adopting the resolution,
The resolution to put it on the ballot.
correct.
But the actual draft ordinance, we could continue to tweak it for another week, right?
No, it has to be provided to the registrar by Friday, I believe.
I thought it was the 12th.
Friday is when we have to get it to the county. Ms. Christian, do you want to add anything in terms of what the 12th date is?
Put those key dates up again.
Antonio, can you share the presentation?
Friday is the last day to put forward a ballot measure.
So, well, so I see two dates here. Place a measure on the ballot, that's the 7th, that's Friday. And then the 12th is to amend it. So
to amend or withdraw, and that means you have to get it back to the county by that date.
That means what?
You have to get it back to the county. The measure that you submit on the 7th, if you want to amend it, you have to have it back to the county by the 12th.
When you put it, so what has to be done by the 7th? Does that include both the resolution and the draft ordinance language? Does that include both of those?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. But so let's say we do that, and then between the 7th and the 12th, we could tweak the draft. We could tweak the draft ordinance language, right?
Yes.
Yeah, is that a yes?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So my second question is this, and I guess it's part question and part criticism, but you've given a lot of examples tonight, and they're all pretty innocuous. You know, it looks like that most of these are, you know, you kind of focused on small businesses. Some of them actually ended up paying less tax. Some of them, their tax went up, $100 or less. And, you look at that and that you think, wow, what's the problem? But I'm going to accuse you a little bit of cherry picking because if you start looking at other examples, they can be pretty stark. For example, a small professional services firm with a $3 million annual revenue would go from $900 to almost $14,000. And I've heard other stories about firms that have calculated their tax liability going from $6,000 a year to $600,000. And so I don't know, I'm afraid that we're not looking at a lot of the scenarios that are pretty dramatic. And I'm not gonna say you did that on purpose, but I'm just saying that's a fact. And I think that's one of the objections I've heard from the business community that I've talked with are, they don't have a problem with the small businesses that are going to get a tax break out of this, obviously. But what they do have a problem with are some of the other businesses that are going to have, going to have 10 or 15% fold increases, and some of them maybe 100-fold increases. And that's a concern of mine. Now, another interesting thing they told me today was they said, look, we don't mind paying more. We know the city needs money. We all need money. Everybody ought to pay their fair share. And they told me that people in the business community they've talked with, none of them would have any objection to doubling what they're paying now. They just don't want to pay 10 times that. So I'm looking at that I'm not asking you to put it up again, but the last chart you had on a PowerPoint that showed how much money we were going to make out of each plan. With the recommended plan, we're just about doubling what we're making now. Isn't that about right? It's 3 million and something both ways. Am I?
Yes.
I'm hearing a yes. So
Yes.
what if instead of creating this incredibly complicated approach to this, you just said, look, let's do what we do now. We'll double it. We'll double it for everybody. And so I'm hearing the business community say they would have no objection to that. They think that's fair. And we'd end up getting the same the same amount of additional revenue we're getting out of this incredibly complicated scheme. So why is there can somebody tell me some reason we might not just take that approach?
So Mayor Budd, I just want to make sure I understood. You're saying to keep the business license based on number of employees and just double it versus going to a gross receipts model?
Right, just double it.
James, do you mind discussing, that would also be something that would have to be written in an ordinance and taken to voters, am I correct?
Well, of course, I know, I understand.
I just want to make sure I'm clear. And then that also right now, if I'm not mistaken, and Antonio, if you could speak to this, when it comes to what some of our rental property owners are paying, can you talk about the equity or the lack of equity there with how we actually are charging?
Sure. Right now, it's currently for property owners, it's based on location. So like I've stated before, if it's a single family dwelling or if it's a 100-unit apartment complex, it charge the same rate. So in essence, a small property owner would see a doubling of the rates for one location, while the location of multi-units.
Well, look, I know everybody's obsessed with a progressive tax schedule and with equity and all that kind of thing. I understand that. But I'm also hearing that the business community, which includes the real estate, the rental community, they're basically saying we don't mind paying double what we're paying now. So I don't think we can build a tax measure like that and vote on it tonight. But I'm just throwing it out there as one of my frustrations about how we've built this incredibly complex system of trying to figure out how to make a little over $3 million extra, when you could do the same thing by just saying, we're going to double your taxes, and the business community is saying, fine, we think that's fine. With what we're doing now, they tell me they're going to run a big campaign against it and oppose it every way they can and so forth. So
I have to point out the voters are much less likely to vote for something that is still, basically the same taxation principles of 1895 versus 2020. I mean, it's not the same initiative if we do that. Basically, we'll be taking an initiative that says, let's look how exciting this is. Let's take the business tax and increase it by 100%.
Well, but I think here's another way of posing it where, you say, look, voters, the city of Richmond needs a lot of money. And one way of doing it is looking at reforming our business tax. And we've gone and met with the business community, which is the community that's going to be paying it. And they're saying that if we just doubled it, they wouldn't have a problem with it.
But let's point out that this
why would anybody vote against that? There's no downside.
That's not how initiative voting works. And beside from that, I would probably vote against that because I honestly, basically, an actually progressive tax takes us into the Roosevelt administration, the Teddy Roosevelt administration.
Well, I guess it's what you're interested in. If you're interested in making a point about progressive taxes, that's one thing. If you're interested in raising $3 million in a way that has the support of the business community, that's another one. Okay, so those are my questions. I see Vice Mayor Bates, you got a hand up? Unmute yourself. Please, Nat. Are you with us, Vice Mayor?
No, I'm not speaking now.
Vice Mayor, did you have a question?
I'm not speaking now. Go ahead with some other one.
Okay, Councilor Willis.
No, yeah. I just wanted to add with Councilmember Choi. I mean, the past couple of weeks have been enlightening about our business tax and structures. But I mean, another problem that I've seen and that's come up in conversation around this is that, you know, one thing in doing outreach that I get a lot is homeowners shouting at me about how much they're paying in taxes and they're living at, you know, based on minimal means. Whereas we have, you know, larger multinational businesses that do business with the city of Richmond. And from the information that was presented to me, I mean, depending on the year, some of them may actually pay less in taxes on any given year than some homeowners. And for me, that in itself just doesn't make any sense. I'd be happy for staff to clarify that to me, but if that's how our tax structures are like set up to where you do have those kinds of examples, and we hear it every year with just the homeowners saying like we are taxed to death and we can't be taxed anymore. I think shifting it into a different format like this gross receipts model just makes more sense just on a practical level, which is why I'm supportive of it. And I wouldn't know how much revenue your proposal would actually bring in, which is why I wouldn't be prepared to support it. And also the model we have, I never have been a fan of, and I've been wanting to change it. And this is our chance to start to move forward on that. So just wanted to add that in for my 2 cents.
Okay, Vice Mayor Bates, are you ready?
I pass.
You need to unmute yourself.
I passed, Tom.
Okay, there you go.
Mr. Mayor.
Pass.
You pass, okay.
I passed. Let someone else.
Okay, Councilor Meyer.
My concern in terms of the direction that the mayor suggested is more just logistically in terms of the stage that we're at, how, you know, working out the numbers and the details for that. I don't think it's something that we can do, but, and I think the mayor's even acknowledging that you know, that would have required us to sort of look at that before. But, you know, one of the things that has been consistently said here is that if we do this, we have a way to look back at the rates and, you know, do exemptions and all that sort of thing once the measure is passed, correct?
That's correct.
So if we want,
sorry, I was going to clarify that the ordinance can be, the rates can be amended to just can't increase the rates, but you can also.
They just can't go up. They just can't go up on people that we don't get, you know, approval to go up. So effectively, if we wanted to, if what the mayor was describing was the approach that the business community was in agreement on, and you know there was a way to do that in a way that logistically worked and was fair, we could kind of adjust the rates to effectively have that effect on the after the passage of the measure, could we not? Or the council could not, I should say. I won't use the we because I won't be on the council, but couldn't the council
so long
do that?
as any of those adjustments, everything just has to be consistent with the language in the ordinance. But so long as the rates don't go up, and I'm also proposing that we add language in, which I indicated earlier, that would provide that, you know, even after the ordinance is, let's say the ordinance is adopted by the voters, council decided to change the rates. There is language in there that allows the council to put the rates back up to where they were. Again, so long as those rates don't end up being increased above what the voters
have approved.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'm only saying that, Mr. Mayor, to say that, you know, there is even if that is the path that you think we can eventually come to, there's a way to do that by passing this measure. There's a way to get this measure on and then have that conversation.
I disagree with you. I mean, I don't think you can change a gross receipts tax back into tax on employees. You know, it's just, you can't do that by changing numbers.
I didn't say that. I meant you could have effectively make it where the majority of the people are only seeing a, you know, increase by the amount that you're saying.
I don't know how it work. Councilor Martinez.
Yeah, so what I heard you say was that the small businesses are okay with the 100% increase. Is that correct?
Is that question for the mayor?
Yes, that question was for the mayor.
Question?
The question, you said that businesses were okay with the 100% increase. This also includes the small businesses?
Well, I mean, you know, when I talk about the business, the people I've been talking to are people representing the chamber and COI and Richmond Main Street and some of the real estate people. And they're the ones who told me that they'd be comfortable with paying twice what they're paying now. They just don't want to pay 10 or 100 times what they're paying now.
Okay, so then you don't know that small businesses would be for paying 100% increase.
Well,
you're just assuming.
I'm just telling you the people I've talked. That's what they proposed. You know.
Right.
That's what they told me. So.
Okay, so and you're assuming that they've talked to small businesses. That's okay. What I hear when I hear businesses say they don't mind 100% increase is that they've been paying way too small in taxes. I mean, you know, when you see no problem with getting 100% increase, that tells me you were paying way too little and you know it. So sure, I don't mind paying 100% more. So you know, which just goes to show that the payroll tax that we've been charging has been far too little, and 100% increase would probably, you know, be more like it. But payroll tax is a job killer. And that's one of the major reasons why we're looking to the gross receipt tax. And I think that this is the direction we need to go. This is what most cities do. And so I don't think we should stay in the Stone Ages of finance just because the people you've been talking to want to stay there. I think we need to move ahead into the 20th century and have gross receipt taxes like most other cities.
Well, I don't know how you could call it a job killer. Right now the formula is like $50 per employee, right? So, you know, whether you get charged $50 for an employee or $100 for an employee, I mean, you're not talking about a lot of money. That's basically a couple of lunches, you know.
And you're making my point.
I know you guys aren't going there. I don't want to debate it. Because...
Well, what I'm saying is that you're making my point. The businesses are paying basically a lunch out instead of what they should be paying in terms of making sure that the city has the money that it needs in order to do the work we need to do to make sure our city operates at a level that is not only good for the residents, but also good for the city. I mean, for the businesses.
Well, the ultimate goal is to, if you're looking at option one, the ultimate goal is to raise a little over $3 million.
Well, it's the $3 million is nice, but I think what we're looking for is the most gain with the least pain, and the best way to do that, and the best way to do that is to make sure that it's equitable, and that it's fair.
Well, again, it depends on what you're interested in. If you're interested in your theory about equity, that's one thing. If you're interested in,
it's not a theory. It's
well,
you know,
but the people you're taxing don't like it. They don't mind doubling what they're paying now. They just
the people who don't like it don't like taxes, period.
Well, okay.
Point of order. This is not helpful for either side.
Yeah, no, we're not going any place here. I think we're ready for public speakers.
Yes, I am.
Same here.
All right, let's call the public speakers.
Okay, these are the comments that were received by the 3 p.m. deadline today. These comments were forwarded to the council. We received 12 comments in opposition of the ordinance, 5 comments in support of the ordinance. We received 1 comment, and the comment is in the industry classification section 7.04.130 of the ordinance. In previous drafts of the ordinance, wholesale sales businesses were included with retail sales and grocers under Class A industry. The current version of the ordinance under section 7.04.130 now has separate classes for retail sales and grocers, but there is no class that specifically includes wholesale sales in its description. We strongly believe that wholesale sales should be included in a class with grocers. Like grocers, we have high dollar volumes, low margins, and a time-sensitive inventory. As the ordinance now stands, it is unclear where a wholesale foods distributor will be classified. We urge the council to correct this inequity before passing on the ordinance. And also in the effective date of the transition section 7.04.680, we urge the council to cap the yearly percentage increase in business tax and phase in the new tax rates over a multi-year period. Let's see, we have 14 callers, and we also have 16 comments to read into the record. And we'll start with our callers. They'll have 2 minutes to address the council.
Okay, I have Elsa Stevens on the line. Elsa, you have 2 minutes to speak. You can go ahead and start.
Thank you. I don't smoke marijuana, but I got so excited when we legalized marijuana because I figured that was going to fix everything in our city. And we haven't seen the infusion of cash that the city needs. I think if we go with option 1, we put it on the ballot, we let people vote on it, we might be in better shape in 2021. We can't wait. It needs to happen this November. And I'm not too worried about somebody who has to pay $600,000 because that is a tiny percentage of their gross intake. If 600,000 represents a tiny percentage of their gross intake, mazel tov. Go with option 1. Let us vote on it. Do it now. Thank you.
Thank you. My next caller is Claudia Jimenez. Claudia, you have 2 minutes to speak. You can go ahead and start.
Hello, City Council members and Mayor. My name is Claudia Jimenez, a Richmond resident. I am urging the Richmond City Council to support the gross receipts business tax structure recommended by city staff using Berkeley's rate as a floor, with an amendment that, like the business tax, the tax on rental properties should also have tiers. The City Council has already voted in favor of this structure. This is fair and means a small property owners will pay a lower rate and larger big landlords will pay the first shares. We need to stop putting a small business and a small landlord in the same bucket as big corporation and big landlord business, and stop continuing the subsidy of big corporation and big landlords by Richmond residents. If you care about economic development, racial and social equity, and supporting a small business and a small landlord, please vote yes and put the gross receipt in the ballot so we, the voters, can decide what we want. And I think like equity is where people who have more pay more, and people who don't make that much pay less. Thank you.
Thank you. My next caller is Katrinka Ruck. Katrinka, you have 2 minutes to speak. You can go ahead and start.
Thank you. Mayor, Vice Mayor, City Council, City Manager, and staff, my name is Katrinka Ruck. Sorry. I'm a resident of Richmond, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Council of Business and Industries, as well as other businesses located in Richmond. These include businesses we spoke to that were from very, very small businesses to medium and larger businesses. And we cannot support a November ballot measure to increase the current business tax rate structure.
We continue to ask the city to follow Oakland and San Francisco's lead to defer a ballot measure and establish a committee to review and meet with the business community, allowing adequate time to review the economic impact this will have. We've recommended that the city meet with various businesses in the different classifications so that each, both small and medium and large businesses, can provide some input. Overall, this is ill-timed during the current pandemic where many Richmond businesses have been impacted. There are still questions remaining outstanding as to how businesses should interpret the ordinance. In fact, tonight we just saw some new changes presented by the city attorney that were not in or posted in the agenda, nor were the comparisons that were shown posted on the website. So public has not had a chance to review these changes. The business community actually has only had 24 hours to review the current posted draft ordinance, which went up yesterday afternoon, which provides higher rates than those that were previously posted 3 or 4 times before. While a progressive business tax structure in which small businesses pay a lower rate than larger ones is a sound public policy, and we thoroughly support it, the details are complex and require significantly more analysis and engagement than can be done in this extremely short and unreasonable time frame. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. My next caller is Michael Vasilis. Michael, you have 2 minutes to speak. You can go ahead and start.
Thank you. My name is Mike Vasilis. I'm a resident of Richmond Annex and the founder of the Association of United Richmond Housing Providers. We're an all-volunteer group representing small housing providers in Richmond. I'd like to start off by thanking LaShonda White, Antonio Banuelos, and the rest of staff who worked diligently throughout this rushed and chaotic process. They've responded really quickly to our meeting requests and has taken in our group's input and concerns, and we feel this is well reflected in the staff report and presentation. I'd like to highlight some of the details that we shared in our meetings to put in front of the council to have some perspective on the state of housing providers in Richmond. Richmond has the highest percentage of small-time housing providers compared to any rent-controlled city. We're also one of the newest rent-controlled cities, with thousands of small-time owners dealing with an overwhelming regulatory system and far below market rents. We have the lowest median rent compared to other jurisdictions, but the 3rd highest rent control fee overall. And even without factoring in a business tax, housing providers are already paying roughly 1.2% fees on gross rents as a whole to the rent department, which is almost $3 million a year. We have the lowest rental property value, but arguably the highest property tax rate of any city comparatively, and a sewer tax that's set to rise almost $1,000 per unit per year alone. And lastly, our industry is the only one in the city whose income is capped and controlled by the city. Our small-time housing providers have been in a crisis even before COVID-19, and now many are faced with mounting rental losses each month. No financial assistance from anyone or these losses in the foreseeable future. Like all businesses that contribute to Richmond, we want to be able to continue to do so, but if our financial burdens increase even more, we literally won't be able to survive in this atmosphere. I think when we talk about a tiered system, I think we should look at the San Francisco model or a model that's based on income rather than size of units.
Your time has expired. Thank you, Michael. My next caller is Lisa Johnson. Lisa, you have 2 minutes to speak. You can go ahead and start.
Good evening, Council. I'm Richmond resident and urging the Council to not rush and place this measure on the November ballot. During this COVID-19 pandemic, many residents and small business owners are in survival mode. If they have not already closed their doors, many are just hanging on by a thread. The addition of yet another financial burden will be too much for many to handle. And when they close their doors or move, that means more employees will or are likely to lose their jobs as well. While businesses understand the city is facing a structural deficit and the need to raise revenue as well as a general willingness to pay more, the process must be reasonable, transparent, recognize each sector's unique attributes, and thoughtfully researched as well as executed. Increasing the tax burden on small businesses at this time will only encourage businesses to leave or force them to close their doors for good. The end result will even be an even greater structural deficit for Richmond and the decay of our essential business community. While a progressive business tax structure may sound good in theory, effective balanced policy and legislation can only occur when all key stakeholders are engaged and have a seat at the table, and when this process is not rushed,
but thoroughly and collaboratively administered. This current policy is not progressive, rather it is punitive and harmful. As I proposed to city staff last Friday and as included in staff's report, I am requesting council delay this ballot measure until March or June of 2021. The $75,000 to $150,000 that it would cost is money well spent to ensure that this process is done correctly and provide a better chance at generating a net revenue gain as opposed to loss due to business either closing the doors or leaving Richmond. Please remember that Richmond is not San Francisco, Oakland, or Berkeley. Richmond has unique challenges and opportunities, and unlike those other cities, our economic recovery following the financial crisis was still in progress pre-COVID. Richmond has now lost that momentum, and this will be the final nail in the coffin for many businesses if you don't listen to them, heed their informed cautionary words. After all, they are the ones who actually own and operate the business. In closing, please stop letting certain groups and outside interests try and control Richmond's fate, as they are merely looking out for themselves, not the city, its residents, or its businesses. Thank you very much.
Thank you. My next caller is Guy Corey. Guy, you have 2 minutes to speak. You can go ahead and start.
Hello, Mayor Butt and members of the council. My name is Guy Corey. My wife and I have an industrial property, and our tenants are a mix of industrial, service, and arts-related businesses. Our small businesses are struggling. Most are attempting to recover from the shutdown, even while another may be pending. They borrowed heavily, both privately and from the SBA, just to stay afloat, and will struggle to repay these obligations. We as landlords have deferred rents and utilities to assist, but at some point, we will have to set up plans for them to be repaid, further adding to their debt. Many will fit. There will be jobs lost and more commercial vacancies, none of which increase city revenues. As a landlord, we have some tenants who are heavy power users. We sub-meter and all pay their share. We collect utilities, pay PG&E, make no money on these transactions. This shows up as almost 20% of our gross receipts, and while not being income, would be taxed. This is especially egregious for residential landlords subject to rent control and unable to raise rents. Both the Fed and state allow legitimate deductions. The city should do the same and make this exempt. We are more than willing to pay our fair share. As property owner, we currently pay $15,000 in special assessments to the city, and we still agree that the business licensing structure needs an update and should be increased. The rates proposed, however, are overstated and unrealistic. They need to be lowered. They're more liable to alienate current business and discourage future business from locating here. I feel that there should be parity between landlords and other small business. Tax the first $250,000 at a flat rate of $200, which is proposed, and gross receipts above that amount at a rate that is finally determined. There has been little time to involve business and property owners or to research the impact of the pandemic, business failure, job losses. I'm assuming the projected revenue was based on previous year's receipts, which have very little to do with what business is facing on the ground now, and with a future that's very difficult to project. Rushing this to the polls is a mistake. This tax could have the opposite effect of its intended purpose with negative consequences for years to come. I would suggest following Oakland's lead by postponing this.
Your time has expired. Thank you, Guy. My next caller is Tom Namprasert. Tom, you have 2 minutes to speak. You can go ahead and start.
Okay. Hello.
Yes.
My name is Tom. I'm living in Richmond over 44 years. Also worked with an Asian Pacific and Council Network. Academic also said that I'm going to highlight in the lab. And then we also have our lead, 31 people sign up in this letter. I urge the Richmond Council to organize business tech, move into the tier group receipt. We believe a tier tech structure for business and rental property is a fair and equitable solution for all. Revenue measure is to help the city deficit budget and also provide a tier tax structure. It will allow us to continue to invest in our kids and our family and also our community without adding too much burden to our small business and the landlord. So we are urging you to go to the tier structure business tax. And so think that this is probably will receive the letter that he sent out to you sometime. But I'd like you to vote for, because that's, I think, it's the fair. So the big business, they need to pay the check. So thank you very much.
Thank you. My next caller is Gabriel Holland. Gabriel, you have 2 minutes to speak. You can go ahead and start.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Gabriel Holland. I'm with SEIU 1021. We're here today to support a progressive tax on business. What, as I understand the first model, it would help small businesses, and larger businesses would pay a larger amount. Just to give you an example that Councilmember Melvin Wells mentioned, there is a company called AA Cass Oils. They made $1.5 billion last year. They're located, they have an office in Richmond warehouse, and they paid $3,012 in taxes, business taxes last year, less than the average homeowner, while their income was $1.5 billion. For too long, homeowners have been subsidizing big business in Richmond. It's just in some ways almost another example of environmental racism. To the extent that homeowners are carrying the burden, small businesses are carrying the burden, and small landlords are carrying the burden, this progressive tax structure would cut a break to small landlords, to small businesses, and homeowners are no longer having to bear the entire cost of taxes in Richmond. So this is, I think, a good solution to a long-standing problem in Richmond. Thank you.
Thank you. My next caller is Tom Welsh. Tom, you have 2 minutes to speak. You can go ahead and start. Tom? Hello? Okay, I'm gonna move on. My next speaker is Mike Parker. Mike, you have 2 minutes to speak. You can go ahead and start.
I can start now?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Hi, this is Mike Parker. I'm a resident of Richmond. I'd like to point out that every time there's an attempt to make the things fairer in Richmond, there are gloom and doom predictions. You may recall the predictions when the city led the way with a minimum wage increase that all these businesses would leave. And in fact, nobody left and employment expanded in Richmond. Companies are going to come to Richmond and stay in Richmond if the city can offer services to assure good quality of life for residents. The question is how. Even if we put this on the ballot now, we're not going to get revenue for 2 years. Deferring it is really going to delay revenue for 4 years. We're going to put the city in terrible financial shape. This is our opportunity to do something to make the tax system fairer so that small businesses can be relieved of taxes. Under most of the proposed systems, small businesses will actually pay less than they do now, especially the small businesses that are struggling. It's only the large businesses and the successful businesses that will be asked to pay their fair share. Secondly, and even more important, is this is the opportunity to help the mom and pop landlords who are struggling now because of the COVID crisis. I want to urge us not only to have a progressive tier system for landlords, but to make sure that we provide for those landlords that have under 4 units, 50% credit for their rent control, a reduction if their units are under rent control, or reduce their allow them to credit their rent control fees to their tax so that they pay virtually zero if they're very small and if they have affordable housing. I urge you to pass this tax and to use this opportunity to make things right for the small businesses and small landlords of Richmond. Thank you.
My next caller is Tom Welsh. Tom, you have 2 minutes to speak. You can go ahead and start.
Thank you. I am a Richmond resident. I also work in Richmond.
for one of the larger companies. This proposal would increase our taxes by over 3,000%. We'd be more than willing to go to 100% increase or even 200% increase, but nobody should have a 3,000% increase in their taxes. So my proposal would be to have some type of a cap on whatever the measure is. And that's really all I have to say.
Thank you. The next speaker is Sean Stahlblum. Sean, you have 2 minutes to speak. You can go ahead and start.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Sean Stahlblum. I'm with IFPT Local 21 and representing Richmond City workers. I urge you to support putting a fair gross receipts tax measure on the November election ballot. We all know the city has an ongoing structural budget deficit that has been exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic, and the city needs new revenue to move toward a more sustainable future for city services. Hopefully, we can all agree it's time to reform the business tax in Richmond. The current structure is giving Richmond's largest businesses and corporate landlords a significant break compared to other cities, while asking Richmond's small businesses and landlords to take on a disproportionate share of the costs for the services the city provides. I'm asking you to support a fair business tax model that asks the city's largest businesses and corporate landlords to pay their fair share. City workers have sacrificed for many years, and they are nearing a breaking point. They love this city, and they want it to thrive in all aspects. But we need a fair business tax structure to help make that happen. The proposal gives the mayor and council the authority to adjust rates downward later if needed. But if we do not act now to put a measure on the ballot, we will face another cycle of drastic budget and service cuts that will hurt Richmond residents and businesses. We also hope you support including a gross receipts tax for rental property owners, one that would ensure small rental property owners are no longer burdened by the big landlords paying the same rate. We want to protect small landlords that are usually more connected to the community while making sure large corporate landlords contribute fairly to the city. Please do not allow giant interests and large landlords to strike down this crucial legislation. There's also been some confusion on the line. City of San Francisco has a progressive gross receipts tax, and they're going to the ballot in November to make it more progressive. Please help Local 21 members better serve Richmond residents and businesses, and let Richmond voters decide this year for themselves this issue by putting a fair gross receipts tax measure on the November 2020 election.
Your time has expired. Thank you, Sean. Our next caller is Ilana Clark. Ilana, you have 2 minutes to speak. You can go ahead and start.
Thank you. My name is Ilana Clark. I'm a Richmond resident with the Association of United Richmond Housing Providers. I want to mention a few things specifically about housing. We have lost over 2,000 units in Richmond in 2018 because of Measure L, and we continue to lose units. Already, we pay the highest fees in the country to our rent board, and we have no, unlike other jurisdictions, we have no way to pass through these costs to our renters in whole or in part. Likewise, this increase in taxes will be impossible for us to pass through. We cannot simply raise rent on our tenants to make up for these increased costs, unlike other businesses. I also want to say that the structural deficit has been the case for many years. I have asked and have not gotten an answer to why this is an issue right now of all times in the middle of a pandemic when we are all having to face some kind of music. And I mean, the timing is horrible. I don't understand why it has to happen now. I think the timing is just, I mean, like you couldn't get worse. So what is it that makes it that we have to address this now? You won't see the money until 2022. And I don't think we can assume that we're just going to come out of this recession by the time this money is due and pass this now. And like we're counting on that. It's doesn't make sense. So, we can't support this tax right now. The timing is terrible.
Your time has
and it
expired.
doesn't
Thank
make
you,
sense.
Ilana. My next caller is Yen Do. Yen, you have 2 minutes to speak. You can go ahead and start.
Thank you. Hello, members of the council. My name is Yen Do. I am union staff for SEIU 10 to 1, representing city workers at City of Richmond. I just want to take a moment to take money out of this equation and put a human face into this. In our lifetime right now, we are seeing a whopping 4 million California displaced and unemployed, 8,210 confirmed COVID contracts, and 131 deaths. California is needing more than ever services restored to help them and their families to have a sense of sanity and community. The very services that city workers provide. Speaking of which, I've heard most of you assert your humble appreciation for the very workers who take care of your community. However, in a time of uncertainty, make your appreciation certain. I'm asking you, members of the board, to reform the business tax in the city of Richmond. I'm asking you, members of the council, to put a progressive gross receipt onto the November ballot. It's not only a fair measure, it's also the right thing to do to help the city of Richmond on the right path and right direction in investing in your community and in your workers. You cannot expect to do the same thing and expect different results. The history of City of Richmond, really nothing has been done. This is your time to shine. This is your time to take a bold approach. Please put the progressive gross receipt onto November ballot for a better Richmond. I thank you for your time.
Thank you. My next caller is Rich Stolstead. Rich, you have 2 minutes to speak. You can go ahead and start. Rich?
Yes, no, I'm here. Do I have to wait till Yendo is done?
No, that's delayed. You can go ahead and start.
So my 2 minutes starts right now?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, my name is Rich Dolstead. I'm the president of Richmond Wholesale Meat. And first of all, I want to thank you for putting together the presentation, LaShonda and Anthony and so forth. Obviously, the financial need is serious, and so you have to go to serious ways to increase revenue. And so I do respect that, appreciate it, and appreciate your communication. Just a few concerns I had was the warehouse category was removed. It's from what I understand, the city has tried and has highlighted that they want to cater to the food industry, the wholesale food industry, like Hello Fresh, Blue Apron, Galaxy Desserts. There's new warehouses being built. It's a place for warehouses, but there's no category. It was removed, so that was a concern. Not sure how to even rate us. There also is the concept of going from a few thousand to a few 100,000 is alarming. I think I could vote in favor of this if it was a phased-in approach, something that was not as radical. Again, like the one comment mentioned earlier, warehouse world by nature gets high revenue, low margin, and so anyway, that kind of increase is huge. Or if there was a cap at a certain percentage, like another gentleman mentioned. So yeah, I could be in favor of it if there was some realistic expectations for the warehouse industry like ourselves. Over.
Okay, thank you. That was my last caller.
Okay, and we're gonna move on. First comment is from Rosemary Levy. Our names are Ephraim and Rosemary Levy. We are senior citizens and small housing providers in Richmond. Staff has highlighted in their report the financial duress small housing providers have been experiencing both before and throughout this COVID-19 crisis. Due to COVID-19, 1/3 of our tenants are unable to pay rent and live in their apartments for free, while we provide a roof over their heads as well as water and garbage. All of our apartments have rents that are way below market rents. Some only pay 1/3 of the market rents and most pay less than a half of market rents. Our rents are indefinitely blocked by rent control, while our building is going to need substantial upgrades in the future, such as a new roof, which is going to be $60,000, new plumbing and electrical, not to mention new kitchens and bathrooms. How do you expect us to pay for all these expenses when the small profits are going to be eaten up by ever increasing property taxes and city fees? We are thankful that city staff has worked hard to hear and respond to small housing providers' concerns during what has been a rushed and chaotic process. We are an integral part of Richmond, however, just one piece of the greater business community that is struggling each day to survive. If the council is determined to move forward with a process that lacks adequate research and stakeholder input, as well as a proper risk assessment based on the foreseeable impact on our city as a whole and possible decline in businesses, jobs, and tax revenue, we urge you to adopt a combined table and the least financial impact possible for each industry. Next comment is from Stan Nesweed. Second. My name is Alina Nesweed, and I and my husband, Stan, are small housing providers in Richmond. Staff has highlighted in their report the financial duress during small housing providers have been experiencing both before and throughout the COVID-19 crisis. We own a fourplex, duplex, and a small family dwelling, representing investment of a lifetime saving and sole source of retirement income for us as a first-generation immigrant family. Our business license tax will go up from $720 to over $4,500, more than sixfold under the Berkeley 2.88% tax model. This is on top of the highest property tax in the county, recently increased sewer rates, ever increasing rent board fees, fire department fees, rental inspection fees, mortgage maintenance, repair expenses, and capped rents. Just recently, we spent over $35,000 on seismic retrofit and over $5,000 on sewer lateral, but are not passing this expense on to our tenants. The tax model is being sold to an unsuspecting public as affecting mostly big billion-dollar businesses. We are not billionaires, but hardworking families who have been responsible, lived frugal, and saved up for their retirement. Who knows what other forms of saving will be taken away from us next? Not to mention that any homeowner may have to become a landlord because of a change in circumstances. I'm thankful that the city staff has worked hard to hear and respond to small housing providers' concerns during the rushed and chaotic process. If the council is determined to move forward with a process that lacks adequate research and stakeholder input, we urge you to adopt a table with the least of financial impact for each industry, especially for small housing providers. Our next comment is from Paul Benton. Please table this issue until governor's shelter-in-place order is fully lifted and business operations can resume normally. Now is not the time to discuss a tax increase. Businesses are struggling to survive, and a hike can trigger unanticipated consequences that make things even worse. Timing the present economy aside, this idea is bad because it creates an incentive to leave Richmond. Work from home is here to stay. Many people who commute to Richmond have concluded that offices are no longer necessary at all in a Zoom world. A gross receipt tax may push more than a trivial number to relocate their offices closer to home or eliminate them permanently. Certainly, a gross receipts tax that is not uniform across the state will be a reason to not open an office in Richmond in the first place. And Sabrina, you want to start on Andrea Malarkey?
Our next comment is from Andrea Malarkey. My name is Andrea, and I'm a Richmond resident and a member of SEIU 1021. And I am urging the Richmond City Council to support the proposed Lift Up Richmond plan. This will help address Richmond's ongoing budget deficit and move us forward to a more sustainable future. Big businesses haven't paid their fair share in far too long, and it's clear the business tax in Richmond needs reform. This proposal is a progressive business tax, which is fair and which encourages businesses to be part of the communities they are in. Right now, homeowners subsidize big business under the outdated, unfair tax structure And if there ever was a time when we needed to flip that
Point
ballot,
of order,
it is now.
Eric, you're unmuted on your mic.
Eric Govan, you are unmuted. Thank you.
Continuing, the way to do that is to hold big businesses accountable, to pay their fair share, and follow our communities to thrive. That's why the Lift Up Richmond plan is ideal. It's a progressive rate structure for property owners, meaning larger property owners like big landlords will pay more than small community-based landlords, and the same for businesses. Don't cave in the demands of a big corporate interest who seek to defeat this crucial legislation. Let Richmond join other Bay Area cities in rebuilding through the progressive Lift Up Richmond plan and bring in resources that will allow us to invest in our community and in our kids in a way that is fair to everyone. Our next comment is from Craig Murray. I encourage you to adopt a resolution placing a gross receipts model business tax on the November 3rd, 2020 ballot. Updating Richmond's business tax to this model will provide a balanced charge to the level of business performed in Richmond. Small businesses with $250,000 or less in gross revenue can balance their budgets with a nominal $200 charge. Other businesses with this new formula can project and plan on an annual basis with the new formula based on the category they are in and what their business license tax will be. Voting tonight to add this gross receipts model business tax will allow the electorate in Richmond to determine if Richmond can model a program similar to Berkeley, Oakland, and San Francisco and help meet its budget obligations and help provide necessary local government service levels. Our next comment is from Sandy Saturn, a proud longtime Richmond resident. I am urging you to support the gross receipts business tax structure that's recommended by your staff using Berkeley's rates as a floor. I would like to recommend the city use a tier tax system and not a flat tax for rental properties. This will allow the smaller landlords with less property to pay an equitable rate and charge the bigger landlords their fair share in taxes. Currently the city is facing massive budget deficits, and I think we can all agree that it's crucial the city puts a tax revenue measure on the November ballot. Please support Richmond families, local jobs, and small businesses by voting yes to placing an equitable tax measure on the November 2020 ballot. This next comment is from Michael Gilkson. I'm a Richmond resident. I am urging the Richmond City Council to support the proposed Lift Up Richmond plan for revising our city's business license fee structure. The Lift Up Richmond plan will help address Richmond's ongoing structural budget deficit and move the city toward a more sustainable future based on the unique attributes that the business community holds in Richmond. Now is the time to act as we recover from the current financial crisis. Currently, homeowners are subsidizing big businesses in Richmond as the tax structure is outdated and unfair. The Lift Up Richmond plan legislation is being modeled after several Bay Area cities to rebuild Richmond to the thriving city it once was. It will provide us with a business tax structure that will allow us to invest in our community, in our kids, and our small businesses so that it is fair to everyone. Thank you for your consideration. This next comment is from Jill Perry. I am both a longtime Richmond resident and a city employee. I am urging the council to support option 1 or option 2 for the tax measure of the November ballot. Not only does the current Richmond business license tax generate insufficient revenue, but it is also very inequitable, especially when it comes to rental properties. A progressive approach is needed to ensure that the burden is divided equally between the small and the big landlords and the small and big businesses, and that they all pay their fair share. Currently, a landlord with 1 rental unit pays exactly the same as a landlord with hundreds of rental units. It's no surprise that these big corporate interests are now opposing this tax measure. This is a progressive tax, and smaller businesses, those with gross receipts under $250,000, will actually pay less than they do now, while the lion's share will be paid by the 400 largest corporations. This tax measure would get Richmond on par with neighboring cities. Richmond has been revenue deficient year after year. It seems that there has been a perpetual budget crisis. Services to Richmond have suffered. The council must choose an option that will bring in significant new revenue. This is absolutely must be on the November ballot. There is no time to waste. Remember that this must be approved by the voters. This doesn't take effect for another year, and it doesn't need to be perfect because the council has the ability to adjust it downward if they decide they need to. There really is no downside to this. This next comment is from Jenny Kampathong, and I'm writing on behalf of the Asian Pacific Environmental Network, APEN, and our Richmond members. APEN is urging the Richmond City Council to modernize the Richmond business tax, moving it to a tiered gross receipts tax. We believe a tiered tax structure for businesses and rental property is a fair and equitable solution for all. A revenue measure is needed to help with the city's deficit budget. By providing a tiered business tax structure, it allows us to continue investing in our kids, our families, and our community without adding too much burden to our small businesses and landlords. Our next comment is from Christina Redzi. I am a longtime Richmond resident. I am deeply concerned that such a huge shift in Richmond's tax structure would be put before the voters in such a hurried and unstudied way. It is certainly unreasonable to explore alternative business tax structures, but it is unreasonable and irresponsible to push something like this forward without a deliberate and thoughtful assessment of the impact on city revenues, existing businesses, future business potential, and Richmond residents. Additionally, moving this along is a rush fashion without adequately engaging the existing business stakeholders, no doubt sends a chill throughout our business community. How prudent is it for businesses to continue to operate in the city with so little regard for what they're currently experiencing? We're in the midst of an unprecedented global pandemic that is having far-reaching and still unknown effects on all of us, including our business community. I am grateful to city staff members who have made notable efforts to gather input under an unrealistic timeline. They have worked hard to hear and respond to concerns. If given enough time, they no doubt will engage stakeholders for a more meaningful input and adequately study the potential impact on our city. But in the short time since this was introduced, that has not been possible. There has been inadequate stakeholder input, inadequate research, inadequate risk assessment about possible decline in businesses, jobs, and tax revenue. If the council members are determined to move forward in spite of such a haphazard process and potential risk to our city, then I implore you to adopt a combined table with at least potential harm possible for each industry. But better yet, please afford our capable city staff the opportunity to do this job right on behalf of all of us. Do not pursue a ballot measure at this time.
This next comment is from Susan Preco. I strongly oppose the proposed gross receipts tax being considered for the November 2020 ballot. Businesses and patrons alike are feeling a pinch and challenges presented by COVID-19. The city will probably not even have a good idea of the actual amount of the impact for at least another fiscal year. Businesses need support from their city, not more struggles. I worry about the impact on small businesses, many of them minority owned, and how large businesses could pass on the tax in the form of the higher prices to already financially strapped patrons. The gross receipts tax proposal exacerbates a time of struggle for Richmond businesses. I encourage a no vote and consider this at another time. Our next comment is from Sadie Egan. I am writing to urge you to vote yes on moving from a payroll tax to a gross receipts tax on the ballot this November. It is clear that sitting on this will delay funding our city desperately needs for years, which is unacceptable. Lack of funding consistently impacts our most vulnerable community members and support services, which is not equitable and not a reflection of our city's values. So while paying higher tax rates may be difficult for some businesses that are accustomed to paying less, the alternative would be to continue to put the funding burden on individuals and families that need the most support. Please move to get this measure on the ballot so the people can vote to prioritize people over profits.
This next comment is from Gail McLaughlin. I am urging the City Council to support the gross receipts business tax structure recommended by city staff using Berkeley's rates as a floor. I also urge an amendment that includes tiers for the tax on rental property, just as the business tax has tiers. The City Council has already voted in favor of this structure. This is fair, and it means small property owners will pay a lower rate, and larger big landlords will pay their fair share. The proposed model will help address Richmond's ongoing structural budget deficit and move the city toward a more sustainable future based on the unique attributes that the business community holds in Richmond. We can all agree it is crucial that the City Council supports this and puts this measure on the November ballot. Currently, the city is facing massive budget deficits. Richmond is a city of small businesses and local thriving industries. This measure allows everyone to do their part without creating hardship. We must provide a business tax structure that will allow us to invest in our community, our kids, and our small businesses so that it is fair to everyone. This next comment is from Tim Fang Zhu, and I am a small housing provider in Richmond. Staff has highlighted in their report the financial duress that the small housing providers have been experiencing both before and throughout this COVID-19 crisis. My existing rent board fees, license fees, sewer taxes, lost rents with no way to recoup, inspection fees, etc., already add up as the barriers to maintaining positive cash flow of my business as a housing provider in Richmond. As proposed, we'd be the only business owner whose gross receipts, let alone net income, is regulated and taxed by the city. State and federal governments only tax us net income. I appreciate the city staff's hard work to hear and respond to small housing providers' concerns during what has been a rushed and chaotic and rogue process. We're in an integral part of Richmond. However, just one piece of the greater business community that is struggling each day to survive. If the council is determined to move forward with this process that lacks adequate research and stakeholders' input, as well as the proper risk assessment based on the foreseeable impact on the city. The next comment shares pretty much the exact same views. That comment was from Jennifer Liang, and that concludes our comments this evening.
So is that, that's all the comments?
Yes.
Okay, well, let's bring this back to the council. What do y'all want to do? Councilmember Willis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I'm ready to make a motion. Like I said, I haven't been happy with the payroll measure that we've already had on the books, and I've been wanting to see something done about it to make it to where it makes more sense. And yeah, no, I think it's a good direction that we need to go in on this gross receipts tax. It makes the most sense to me, so I'm prepared to make a motion. Yeah, I'll just make the motion, and I know there will be discussion, but I'll make a motion that we adopt option 1 of staff's recommendation, using Berkeley as a floor, with the amendments to the recommendation that they put forward, that we use Berkeley's rental tax rate rather than the one that they proposed. And also for small landlords with 4 units or less, they would be able to, if they pay fees to the rent board, they'd be able to credit that.
I second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion to second. I would like to offer a friendly amendment, and that is that as a part of this, we set up a working group to explore any revisions to it. Once that the kind of thing everybody's talked about. You have a problem with that?
I think there's other discussions on it, but would the working group influence what's going on the ballot right now, or
No,
just
no, it would be afterwards.
Oh, after, if it's adopted, then the working group would sit and talk about it.
Right. Right.
I personally don't have an issue. I don't know if my seconder has an issue.
You have a seconder, Councilman Martinez? I mean, you have a
Yes. I don't have an issue with discussion.
Okay, there's no downside. Okay, Councilmember Choi? Unmute.
Sorry. Before we proceed, I am a little struck by some. I just wanted to get some questions about what we answer some questions probably from staff. I'm guessing probably Mr. Atencio. What exactly, as far as how much we can amend, like the work of this working group, for instance, we can amend the rates if they go down, which is very understood. Can we amend the industry categories? It strikes me that there's some category, we have firearms and ammunition, but we don't have warehouses, which strikes me as a little bit of a problem.
Well, two things we can do. I guess one, you can discuss it now and address it tonight, or down the road, what we could do is, if there's a category or if there's some sort of ambiguity within the existing structure, and we want to add that category or ensure that that category is that those two classifications are incorporated into a certain category, the council can basically provide that interpretation, and maybe as part of a resolution or something.
So we can resolve to say that warehouses would fall into grocers?
Well, if it would be a rational, if there was some basis behind it, there's findings in the resolution, for example, that would reflect the rationale that the council is using in order to make that determination.
But I'm actually looking for something that I could reasonably, without incredible amounts of shame, put a warehouse into, and I'm not seeing it here. So I'm thinking we should add at warehouses. At the very least, we have a lot of warehouses in the city, and I would not want them to go.
Sorry.
It just, I don't see another category that makes, without twisting ourselves in a pretzel, we're going to be able to use. So why don't we just add warehouses and come up with a rate that might be that's going to probably be changed, but that's a reasonable rate for warehouses right now.
Can I just ask a quick question?
Yes.
On that point, were warehouses left out intentionally? That's what I'm a little confused by this. Was that an intentional decision?
I was confused too, honestly.
Or was that something that was done because there was an assumption that they would fit into another category?
Probably assumption that would fit into another category. I'm looking at the municipal codes for both Berkeley and Oakland. Neither has warehouse either.
Yeah. What about something like Amazon, which is a lot of warehouse, but
my understanding, other cities treat them as professional services.
Okay. Well, then that sounds reasonable to me.
All right. Okay.
So are we adding, I'm happy to accept those as friendly amendments to the motion if that's what some of my other colleagues want to add in. I don't have an issue.
I think what was suggested as having it as a under the what was it? Yes.
And warehouses under the professional services category?
Yes.
That's your recommendation?
What? That makes no sense.
I think that's what Oakland does. That's all that was said. But I don't know. I mean, Councilmember Choi sort of brought this up, and I think he said that you'd already put a friendly amendment to deal with it, so we probably don't need to keep going back and forth. Right?
Is that acceptable to you, council member?
Well, professional services is crazy.
No,
I'm
not
sorry.
that.
Antonio, sorry. Really quickly, Antonio, I believe that in other places, Amazon, as an example, as a distributor, a warehouse,
right.
Wholesaler, has fit under business and personal services versus professional.
Okay.
But I think we have two competing friendly amendments. One was to add the category of warehouses.
I don't think there was another friendly amendment made.
Okay, well, I think
it was a part of the discussion. I'm just willing to add it as a friendly amendment because admittedly I was confused that warehouses weren't there either. I'm glad Councilmember Choi brought it up. I would like to, include them, but I want to include them in a way that makes sense too.
So we have two options, right? We can add it to an existing category tonight, and then, we could modify that and break it out so long as the rate that we break it out into isn't higher than what category it gets placed in tonight. We can place it in its separate category tonight. That's another option. Just hammer it out. And I don't know if Antonio, if you've looked into any rates or if you maybe you're familiar with what kind of rates that we can use for a standalone category.
Did you want me to show the rates that we have currently?
Quick question before you do that. I know when we first talked about this, as we were still learning, we talked about adopting something close to Oakland's model. And I know they have to have some sort of like warehouse rate structure out there because I know they got warehouses. Like, did we look at what Oakland did on this question?
Oakland has warehouses in the same category as manufacturing, transportation, information, biotechnology, clean technology, and food services.
That's weird. I think a new category called warehouses and wholesale sales might be in order. And maybe we should look at retail sales and take some percentage, some use that as a base to figure out what rates we should preliminarily put on that category. In other words, it'll be lower than retail sales, I would imagine.
Does that make sense to staff?
Actually, I would think it would be higher than retail sales since the markup is higher.
Let's just, I agree with Councilmember Choi. Let's just make warehouses and wholesale distributors its own category. And does staff like have a recommendation on rate structures that we could look at so it, you know, is fair?
Antonio, we can bring up, if you're interested, we can pull up the model as Berkeley rates as the floor. That's part of the recommendation, so that we can all look at the same time at what those rates are for the different categories.
Okay.
Right there. So retail sales and grocers is the lowest, the lowest rates, and maxing out at 0.2. And then for retail, you have 0.3 as the max.
But you said
it should be between grocers and retail then.
You said that they categorize warehouses under business and personal services, which is much higher than any of the
Which
other.
makes no sense at all by
But
any.
that's in another jurisdiction, and they have, this is not, these rates aren't based on their rates at the moment. They have a flat rate in Oakland.
If I could jump in here a minute, I asked this question to Antonio earlier today, and he told me that the business and personal services category applied to warehouses. So
That's
if you want to, why don't you just put a separate line item in there, warehouses, and then use the same rate schedule as you have for business and personal services?
I'd agree to that.
That seems like an obscenely high rate.
Isn't that what you wanted to do?
No, I wanted to put it in a reasonable business, like probably between grocers and retail. That would be my guess, just knowing what businesses are like.
So we can add a category.
Well, if you want to give Amazon a break, I'm sure we could do that. But
Amazon would likely be transportation and trucking.
Not their warehouses.
I already asked Antonio about that today, and he wrote me a detailed response back about how the business and personal services would cover Amazon.
Warehouse might be different than transit center.
And the definition for business and personal services includes language involving packaging, transshipping, storing. It does suggest that warehousing would fall under, at least the way it is written now, could be interpreted to fall under business and professional services.
Well, I don't understand what it is you're trying to do. You're trying to cut a tax break for warehouses, or you're trying to get them to pay more? What's the point?
I'm not trying to get a tax break for warehouses, but it strikes me, it strikes me that a consultant and a warehouse are not the same business. That's all. I want some explication on how it would reasonably be done, because we have a lot of warehouses and we don't have a lot of firearms ammunition here.
We don't have any.
That's right. So let's make sure firearms ammunition. That struck me as a much more important category to have on here.
Yeah, I mean, Given the definition that the staff just gave us, though, I mean, that would sway me to put the warehouses under professional services or using the, or creating a category and using that as
Look, look, I know people are thinking about Amazon, but I'm thinking about Galaxy Desserts. I'm thinking about the granola place. I'm thinking about those kinds of places. I'm thinking about those small businesses. They're a few blocks from where I'm sitting right now.
They're manufacturing, they're not warehouses.
All right. Well, as long as there are a lot of warehouses around here anyway, but I just don't see how an architect or an interior designer has the same type of business as a warehouse. That's all I'm saying.
Councilmember Choi, if I may, you know, if the council chose to put warehousing in, or just basically interpret warehousing as being part of business and personal services at the rate it's at, and determines later, again, that rate is too high, that it can be reduced. And actually, that's an example of where you can take that specific category out of that specific, you know, industry out of that category and set a separate rate that's lower than the 0.18 that it would be under business.
Okay, so we do have the ability to create a new category.
That's an example of how you can create that, right?
Okay.
So that's an example of.
That gives me clarity. So let's add a warehouses, put the same rates in as retail sales, and we'll work on it from here. How's that?
I'm here though. If you put in if we can do that, the retail sales, that means, James, at the 0.32 is the highest. We can't go any higher than that for that category.
If you put it in under retail sales, all those tiers represent the cap. You can't go any higher than that. That's correct.
Yeah.
I
don't think that's doable. The problem someone said that there's no way you can go wrong, and the only way we can go wrong is by setting them too low. I mean, we could set them as high as we want and then always go down. The purpose of this is the most gain with the least pain, and I think that we need to look at people like Amazon, who has large amounts of capital and has a high gross income, that I think they're in the proper category when they're under business and personal services. And if we were going to separate them, I would suggest that we give them the rates of the business and personal services.
Why don't we do that and work on it to figure out where they should lie?
And there's going to be a group accompanied with this motion too, so that could be part of what they talk about if this measure is to be adopted.
Perfect.
So, maker of the motion, do you accept that suggestion?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
That's fine with me. I don't.
Seconder of the motion, do you accept it?
Reluctantly, I don't like it, but if the maker of the motion goes for it, then who am I to
Okay, we
disagree?
actually might be ready to vote on this. Can you put the gallery back on, please?
I do not want to delay the motion while Antonio does that. We, as staff, were able to hear from council and know that they wanted a progressive kind of tiered model around for rental property rates. So we have some examples, starting with the Berkeley model and having some different ones, if council would be interested in seeing that.
Wait, we got a motion, we got a second.
Okay, I just want to share. I know
Also, Councilmember Bates has been having his hand up for like 10 minutes.
Vice Mayor Bates, you're up.
All right, Vice Mayor, I apologize.
Well, probably doesn't mean very much, but I'd like to point out a couple reasons why I'm not going to support this motion. First, it's ill-conceived. It's put on by staff and the labor unions. The very people who are affected, the homeowners, the businesses, were only involved within the last few days. And just listening to the conversation, I don't know if this can really understand what we're voting on. Secondary, you want to all of a sudden tax Amazon. We worked hard to bring Amazon in here. I remember John Trout and myself talking to some of the Amazon people. Just as easy as they came in here, you continue to stick it to them and they can pull up. That's very easy for them to do. Secondary, I listened to the comments. Overwhelmingly, the members and the individuals who won this tax are the ones that are not gonna pay one dime, except maybe a few. They don't pay, some of them don't even live in Richmond to pay property tax. So all of a sudden, they're gonna tell us, hey, stick it to the business guys. We know that there's about 40 million unemployed people out there. We've lost jobs, we've lost businesses, and we've lost taxes. This epidemic is going to continue, and what we need to do is try to be stable as much as possible and wait and see what's going to happen down the road. Now, someone said, well, we'll put the tax on and then we'll reduce it. I want someone to tell me when any politician or elected official body put a tax on, that they all of a sudden reduce the tax. It's not going to happen. So I'm not going to vote for it because I think it's ill-conceived. You're sticking it to the very people who are already hurting, and they're going to hurt even more. So what you need to do is bring all of those parties together, come up with a comprehensive tax measure that the homeowners, the landlords, the small businesses, the big businesses can all support. And I think you'll have a better chance of being successful at a ballot measure. The last question I asked, what is the percentage? Is it 50 plus 1 or is it 2/3% for the passage of such a ballot measure?
It would be 50 plus 1.
Well, no matter what you come up with, it's going to be difficult because you're going to find the business community and a whole lot of other people going to come out real strong against it. And the last thing is that Richmond has perhaps the highest tax rate in the Bay Area, if not the state. And all you're doing, you're continuing to stick it to the people who continuously have paid diligently over a number of years. And I will not be a party to continue to put the tax burden on those that can least afford it. That's my comment.
Okay, thank you, Vice Mayor. I actually think we're ready for a vote.
If I may, Mr. Mayor, I just want to confirm, Councilmember Willis, that your motion includes the recommendations from staff tonight as far as the changes to the resolution with respect to the ballot measure and the additions that we proposed in the presentation, which involve the exemption amendment language and the franchise fee amendment or the franchisee amendment language, the franchisee exemption language.
And the addition of the employee definition.
And the addition of the employee definition. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that. I just want to make it clear that, you know, the main two things that I wanted to see amended, aside from what we added from Councilmember Choi and Mayor Butt, is you know, adjusting the rental rates to be comparable to what Berkeley has rather than the recommendation you presented us with. And also to allow for those who have 4 units of less in terms of rental property and who are paying fees to the rent board, that if they're paying this tax, they can credit that if they're paying fees to the rent board rather than pay a rent board fee in addition to this tax too, if you have 4 units or less. I want that to be clear in the motion primarily, along with the other amendments that my colleagues have added to, which I have no problems with.
Does the seconder agree with all that?
Sure.
And just to clarify one thing further, the change in the rental rate structure is rather significant. And it sounded like there was some information available that you hadn't already seen this evening that staff might want to present, just so you understand the impact of that decision.
That is correct. We have a simple table that we are happy to show that shows you a few different rates just for your consideration based on Councilmember Choi's comments earlier about not seeing a progressive model.
I'll leave it up to the rest of my other colleagues. I know I've been talking about this for the past couple of weeks, so personally, I'm ready to move. But I'll leave it up to everybody else.
Well, we have a motion and a second. I think, Madam Clerk, I think you're ready to call the roll.
Vice Mayor Bates,
No.
Councilmember Choi,
Yes.
Councilmember Johnson,
Abstain.
Councilmember Martinez,
Yes.
Councilmember Myrick,
Yes.
Councilmember Willis,
Yes.
and Mayor Butt.
No.
So the motion passes with Vice Mayor Bates and Mayor Butt voting no, and Councilmember Johnson abstaining.
Thank you.
And I think that brings us to the end of our agenda, doesn't it?
That is the end of this agenda.
Okay, well, have a nice evening, everyone. It's still light outside. You can go out and enjoy the sunset.
Oh,
But it's not like where you're at. You're in the dark.
I need to go outside to get some light.
Mayor
All
Butt,
right.
there is another council meeting on the 12th at 10 a.m.
There is? For what purpose?
See y'all in a week.
City attorney interviews.
Oh, that's okay. All right. Good night, everybody.
Good night. I
Night.
thought the sun was still up in Hawaii.
It's 8:12 p.m.
Well, good night, everyone. Having a good one.